Part 52. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 526. Inside Lianji Peak. The princess and Lin Ling sat opposite each other. Lin Ling raised her notebook and asked Musian, "Who is this person?" Musian smiled and said, "Princess of Yunzhou, you should have heard of her, right? In the 9 provinces, there is only one cultivator who is born with the great Dao. The cultivators below may not know, but Miss Linglong should know." Musian originally thought so. However, unexpectedly, Lin Ling shook her head gently. "I don't know her." Musian. "You and she are both born with the great Dao, but you don't know her," Musian said in surprise. Lin Ling made a confused sound AAA, with a puzzled look of "Why do I have to know her?" Then, her eyes quickly fell on Musian, raised the notebook and asked, "It's only been less than a month, how come you have reached the peak of return to void?" The princess smiled and glanced at Musian, wanting to see how he would answer. "It's a long story. In general, it's just that I encountered some opportunities, but the details are more complicated." This kind of words can only deceive children, the princess thought. Lin Ling nodded thoughtfully. I see. Is it over?" Doesn't she doubt what Musian said at all? There was a trace of doubt in the princess's beautiful eyes, and she couldn't help asking, "What is your relationship with Linglong?" She could feel that Linglong's trust in Musian was almost blind. But Linglong seems innocent, but it is actually very difficult to get into her heart. Maybe Linglong is indeed easy to deceive, but the problem is, Linglong is born to feel the malice and kindness of others. If he plots against her, he may not even have the chance to get close to her. Hearing this, Lin Ling looked at Musian with a bright look, as if she wanted to hear his answer in person. Musian sighed and changed the subject. "Sister Princess, do you remember why I invited you to Lianji sect?" The princess nodded gently. "You brought me here because it was related to your enlightenment tribulation and the spirit dragon. What do you want to do?" For a moment, Lin Ling and the princess stared at Musian, their attention completely attracted by the suspense he had just deliberately left. Musian said, "Actually, I asked you to come here for the matter of celestial ascension." The princess raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "You mean, Linglong is about to celestial ascension?" Musian nodded gently. "Senior Linglong has already touched the threshold of celestial ascension, but he is unable to touch the great Dao, so it is difficult to celestial. So you want to let Linglong touch the great Dao through me?" The princess understood something and sighed softly. "It's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't let Linglong touch the great Dao. The reason why you can get close to the great Dao is because you use me as a medium, and then you and I have a spiritual energy exchange ceremony, but Linglong and I can't do that kind of thing." The princess's pretty face blushed slightly, and it seemed that it was difficult to say that sentence. Musian understood that the princess was able to let him touch the great Dao because she could transfer the spiritual energy that was naturally close to the great Dao into his furnace through dual cultivation. But with Linglong, there is no way to use that method. "Is there no way to let Ling touch the great Dao?" Musian frowned secretly and thought. It's not that there is no way. At this moment, a cold and pleasant voice suddenly came from outside the pavilion. Musian looked over and saw his senior sister in a moon-white dress. Lan Murian was also looking at him. Her eyes swept over the 3 people, and then she stayed on the plump and sexy princess for a while without leaving a trace. "Senior sister, why are you here?" Musian suddenly asked, interrupting Lan Murian's suspicious look at the right time. Lan Murian said lightly, "Master knows that you will come back today, so I left a letter for you in advance." As she said, she took out a letter from her sleeve and handed it to Musian. "I haven't read it yet." "Master said that this letter can only be read by you," Lan Murian said calmly, but she couldn't hide her envy and jealousy in her words. "It's the first time to have a man you like and the first time to have a respected master. It's obviously 2 happy things, But why did it become like this? Lan Mulian was not jealous, but envied Musian for having a letter written by the sect leader himself, and only he could read it. For Lan Mulian, Shang Yanfei was like her master and her mother. Lan Mulian, who lost her mother at a young age and had never felt the love of her family, felt the warmth of family love from Shang Yanfei. Of course, if Lan Mulian knew that Musian had suppressed her most respected master at Lianji Peak a few days ago, I don't know what she would think. Musian opened the letter and glanced at it. When you see this letter, I'm afraid I've already. Musian's heart sank slightly when he saw this paragraph, and then he saw the follow-up continued, I'm afraid I'm already resting, so don't worry. How could this woman like to play tricks on people? Musian was speechless, and he felt that the image of the mysterious and powerful sect leader's sister in his heart seemed to be collapsing. He knew that Shang Yanfei had some problems with her health, so he was worried about her at the first time, but he was deceived by her. But then, what concubine Shang Yan wrote in her letter was down to business. I know you will definitely help the spirit dragon become immortal and ascend, but her way is too special. No one in this world can help her, not even Gu Ningxian same. Gu Ningxian? Could it be the princess's name? Musian subconsciously looked at the beautiful woman and continued reading, no one in this world can help her, but there is something that can allow Linger to come into contact with the Dao. As long as he comes into contact with the Dao, he will pass the test of the Dao, Linger can naturally ascend. Musian read along the contents of the letter and saw the 8 words written at the end, Forbidden Place, Flower of the Avenue. The content of the letter came to an end here. Musian was still thinking about what concubine Shang Yan had written in the letter. At this time, the concubine finally couldn't help but asked in confusion, looking at this, do you know sect master Shang? Lan Mulian asked, what did master say in the letter? Although she still looked cold, she always looked directly at Musian, her eyes twinkling with curiosity and curiosity. Sect leader Shang asked me to find a kind of treasure of heaven and earth. She said that treasure of heaven and earth can allow Senior Linglong to come into contact with the Great Road. Musian paused when he said this. After collecting the letter, he asked, have any of you heard of Flowers of the Avenue? The elixir in the forbidden land of Dongzhou, the princess asked almost subconsciously. She is truly worthy of being a powerful person in the Hedao realm. The princess has indeed rich experience. Mu Jian was amazed in his heart, and then glanced at Lin Ling who was standing aside. The silver-haired beauty held her cheeks in her hands, blinked her cute red starry eyes, tilted her head, and looked confused, as if she was saying, what is the flower of the avenue? Is it delicious? Well, there are also differences between Hedao. At this time, Lin Ling seemed to have noticed something. She turned to look at Musian, wrote something in a small notebook, and then handed it to Musian to read, are you talking bad about me in your heart? Miss Linglong is like nothing else, but she is simply invincible in sensing other people's evil thoughts. Musian immediately shook his head, I didn't, you misunderstood. Lin Ling was obviously unhappy. She held her cup and drank water silently, not wanting to talk to Musian. The girl's happiness or displeasure was written directly on her face. At this moment, she felt that Musian was dealing with her. Put aside the matter of appeasing Linger for now, Musian looked at the princess and asked, Your Highness, the flower of the avenue you mentioned comes from the forbidden place of Dongzhou. He inadvertently changed Sister Princess to Her Highness the Princess, and glanced at his senior sister without any trace. Fortunately, the princess didn't think much about it and hummed softly, it is rumored that there are elixirs in every forbidden place, and often the elixir refined from one elixir can make a concubine, the Taoist power has emerged and ascended. However, the forbidden land is too dangerous, and even the powerful power is at risk of falling. So far, I have only heard that Emperor Daipen got a fairy medicine. Lan Mulian couldn't help but ask, can't you cultivate elixir artificially? The princess shook her head slightly, Luo Tan once used imperial medicine as an experimental product and spent nearly a lifetime cultivating the elixir, but it failed in the end. Later, she came to the conclusion that the elixir was born naturally and could not be cultivated, and elixirs only exist in forbidden places. Is the Forbidden Land really that dangerous? Musian suddenly thought to himself. The danger of the Forbidden Land is because the rules there are different from those of the outside world, so the power of the Hedeo power will also be limited. But since he can temporarily block the rules of heaven and earth, can he also block the rules of the Forbidden Land? The princess glanced at him and said seriously, "Do you know why all the monks are afraid of the forbidden place and don't even dare to approach it? Every great power of Hedeo will bathe the land there after death, and even all things will be blessed. However, in the forbidden place, after the death of the great power, all things will not be blessed, but will become a curse. Even if you accidentally violate the rules there, you will definitely become food in the forbidden place." Lan Mulian said to himself thoughtfully, "I once heard Master mention that the 9 taboo places are extremely dangerous. Some young monks may be fine as long as they follow the rules when they step into them, but if they are monks who are enlightened or above, there is a great possibility that it will be swallowed by the forbidden place." Musian said oh and asked, "So there should be monks who have ventured into forbidden places for the sake of fairy medicine?" He is very aware of the greed of human nature. If there is really news that there is elixir in the forbidden place, even if they know that they are going to die, someone will definitely step into it to look for the elixir. "Yes, and there are quite a few," the princess said. "It's just that these monks were not killed by the ancient creatures in the Forbidden Land, but died of not knowing what the rules of the Forbidden Land were. Emperor Dapen once sent many monks from Yunzhou to enter the Forbidden Land of Life, and one of their teams almost entered the deepest part. There were about 20 people in that team, but in the end only one came out alive, and of that person so he is alive because his surname is Lan." Musian glanced at Lan Mulian subconsciously. Lan Mulian glanced at the young man sideways, and then asked, "What does this have to do with the surname Lan?" "One of the rules of the Yunzhou Life Forbidden Land is that only the 3 surnames Lan, Xiao and Ye can enter. I later checked the historical records and it seems that the ancient creatures there had 3 deceased wives, namely Lan, Xiao and Leaf." "Why are the rules of the Forbidden Land of Life so weird?" Musian complained speechlessly. "The rules of some taboo places are very strange. In the final analysis, these rules are made by people. As long as you are a person, you will make some strange rules." When the princess said this, she seemed to remember something and glanced at Musian faintly. "Aren't the rules of heaven also very strange?" At this point, even a fool can guess the relationship between Musian and Tianting. You have to be barefoot, wearing stockings and a skirt to enter the heaven. Who else but Musian would set such a strange rule of the heaven for no reason? Musian coughed slightly and said, "Then do you know where the forbidden place in Dongzhou is?" "The flower of the avenue should be deep in the forbidden place in Dongzhou, right?" When Lan Mulian heard this, he couldn't help but frown slightly. "I have never heard that there is a forbidden place in Dongzhou now. There are more or less forbidden places in various parts of Kyushu that monks have set foot in for those rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures, but Dongzhou is the only exception. Because since the ancestors of the Blue Clan suppressed the Forbidden Land, the Forbidden Land in Dongzhou seemed to have disappeared mysteriously and faded out of people's sight." The princess glanced at Lan Mulian and showed a gentle smile. "There is indeed no forbidden place in Dongzhou." Musian was startled. "There is no forbidden place? Then why is it called the 9 Forbidden Places?" "The Forbidden Land in Dongzhou suffered heavy losses, and was later suppressed by the ancestors of the Blue Tribe. Now that area has long existed in name only," the princess said. "In other words, the flower of the avenue may never be found." Musian couldn't help but frown secretly. As if she understood what Musian was thinking, the princess continued, "The Forbidden Land in Dongzhou did disappear, but later someone established their own power in the Forbidden Land. This force is very powerful. It has gone through the baptism of history but still exists in Dongzhou. It still retains some of the rules of the original Forbidden Land. After Musian was stunned for a while, he seemed to think of something and murmured, "Restricted area." Yes, there is no forbidden place in Dongzhou anymore, but the forbidden area is built on the ruins of the forbidden place. Therefore, after some monks rashly stepped into the forbidden area, they were inexplicably cursed and died. The princess nodded, acknowledging Musian's guess. Then, she continued, "But I advise you to give up." The princess' tone became a little softer and she said softly, "The restricted area has always been independent of the world. The powerful forbidden places in the past were eventually completely destroyed by the current restricted area. Even if there is a flower of the avenue in the restricted area, they will not be able to give it to you. After all, the elixir involves the secret of ascension." Seeing that Musian was silent, the princess said softly, "There may be other ways. You don't have to be too depressed. And according to my judgment, the flower of the avenue has probably not been found in the restricted area. If there is a fairy medicine in the restricted area, I'm afraid I've already asked Luo Tan to try refining it privately. There's no way it's been silent for 10,000 years. If we can go deep into the restricted area and take a look, maybe we can find the whereabouts of the flower of the avenue," Musian said suddenly. Upon hearing this, the princess immediately spoke to dispel Musian's thoughts, "Give up. Although the forbidden land of Dongzhou has been destroyed, most of the rules are still there, and the restricted area has always been exclusive. I'm afraid you haven't gone deep into the restricted area yet," was killed by the tribesmen responsible for guarding the restricted area. There seems to be some movement in the restricted area recently. Maybe they are also looking for the flower of the avenue. If you step in rashly, you will be in great danger, the princess continued to add. Musian shook his head. "The movement you mentioned is probably that they are holding an inheritance ceremony to elect a new owner of the restricted area. I think it has nothing to do with the flower of the avenue. After all, among the people participating this time is the biological daughter of the owner of the restricted area, so the restricted area naturally takes it very seriously." The princess was stunned for a moment and said, "How do you know so clearly?" "Due to special rules, no outside forces can penetrate the restricted area, so the restricted area has always been extremely mysterious in the eyes of outsiders. As a result, it seemed from Musian's tone that he knew everything about what happened in the restricted area." Lan Mulian said expressionlessly, "The Holy Lady of the Forbidden Zone is a disciple of the Liangyi section. Junior brother got to know her when we were in Tianqian City. Sure enough, they are old acquaintances." "How many old acquaintances does he have, and how many secrets does he hide?" The princess narrowed her eyes, and her usually gentle eyes now looked a little more dangerous. Long before Musian said that he had a natural spiritual body, the princess had suspected that he was involved with a certain princess in the restricted area. Now it seems that this guess is indeed correct. At this time, Musian put down his teacup, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Maybe, I can try to go to the restricted area." Ask for a vote after a long time. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 527. Liangji Peak. Lan Murian came to the front of the courtyard and looked respectfully at the woman who was sitting in the courtyard playing chess with herself to kill time. Shang Yanfei didn't look up, but asked softly, "Has he left?" Lan Murian hummed softly, "Junior brother learned that Senior Linglong wanted to ascend to heaven and might need the help of the flower of the great Dao, so he has just followed the princess of Yunzhou to the forbidden area. Many people are still unclear about the rules of the forbidden land in Dongzhou. The princess is willing to take your junior brother to the forbidden area without knowing the rules. It seems that she has deep feelings for him." Shang Yanfei stopped the action of placing the pieces and smiled, "But with your junior brother's personality, I'm afraid he won't let her go into the forbidden area with him. The forbidden land is different from any other place. Even the great powers in the Hedeo realm are at risk of falling. After all, that is the rule set by the heavenly Deo. The way to cultivate immortals is against the will of heaven. Even if you cultivate to the extreme, you are still a human being. As a human being, you must have awe of heaven. Lan Murian opened her red lips slightly, hesitating a little, as if she wanted to say something. You want to ask me why I didn't let you leave Lianji Peak and accompany your junior brother to the restricted area, Shang Yanfei asked. A trace of unnatural look flashed in Lan Murian's cold and beautiful eyes. I just think that he is a disciple of Lianji sect after all, and he has helped me a lot in the past. This time is the time to repay him. He is now at the peak of returning to the void. Although it will take some time to stabilize and adapt to this realm, with his current strength, he doesn't have to worry about being attacked by others. Shang Yanfei paused, looked at Lan Murian with a smile, and said, "You have almost understood the inheritance left by Lan Shiwei for you, right?" Lan Murian showed a trace of surprise on her face, as if she didn't expect that her master didn't even leave the door, but knew about this matter. Even the members of the Lan clan, and even the head of the Lan clan, didn't know that Lan Shiwei had completely handed over the inheritance to her. With your aptitude, plus the mark that Lan Shiwei once left in your body, it is only a matter of time for you to realize the truth after the fifth transformation and return to the void. But I see that you seem a little confused these days. What troubles you? Shang Yanfei asked. Lan Murian hesitated and said, "Now the heavenly Deo is in trouble, but most of the cultivators in Zhuzhu will choose the heavenly Deo as the method of enlightenment. I am thinking, even if the fifth transformation returns to the void, what should I choose to realize the truth?" "You don't have to choose anything," Shang Yanfei said calmly. Lan Murian looked at Shang Yanfei in surprise, and subconsciously said, "What does master mean by this?" Shang Yanfei looked at Lan Murian quietly and smiled, "Who told you that you must choose one of the heaven, earth, and man to realize the truth?" Dongzhou, restricted area. This is the forbidden area of Dongzhou. The rules of heaven and earth in it are completely different from those in the outside world. Most cultivators who rashly step into it will die in the curse. But if you are familiar with the rules of the restricted area, it is actually not impossible to find some natural treasures or rare monsters in the restricted area and leave alive. Most of the natural treasures in the forbidden area are not available in the outside world, so they can often be sold at extremely high prices in the auction house. Such a price is enough to save ordinary cultivators 20 or 30 years of hard work. Therefore, there have always been some cultivators who ventured into the forbidden area for the purpose of gold panning in order to capture rare monsters or even find some natural treasures. Now that the rules of heaven and earth have changed drastically and the golden age has begun, the enlightenment realm is no longer a difficult height to reach. The resources required to enter the enlightenment realm are far beyond people's imagination. Some casual cultivators do not have the support of a big family and can only pin their hopes on dangerous places such as the forbidden area. And those cultivators with big families behind them generally do not risk stepping into the forbidden area. After all, they can use the resources given by the family behind them to forcibly pile up a saint in the enlightenment realm. In the era when the immortals cannot be born and the integration of the Tao is not obvious, the saints in the enlightenment realm are the top batch of cultivators. The princess tore open the space crack and took Musian to the periphery of the forbidden area. Looking forward, you can vaguely see a green meadow in the restricted area, towering ancient trees rising from the ground, with green branches and leaves, emitting a little glow, and fiery red flowers swaying in the wind, charming and charming. The vegetation here looks beautiful, but I don't know how many monks' bones are buried underneath. Sister Princess, just send me here, I can walk the rest of the way by myself. Musian stopped and looked at the beautiful woman beside him, saying softly. The princess frowned slightly and said, "I'll take you in. The restricted area does have rules that do not allow cultivators above enlightenment to enter, but if I want, I can temporarily ignore these rules." Musian shook his head slowly, "No, You don't have to take risks with me, my strength is just within the rules, and there will be no danger in the restricted area. Besides, you have been out for so long, Dapen Emperor will probably be worried, right? Musian continued. The princess glanced at the young man with her beautiful eyes and said lightly, if he was worried about me, he wouldn't be hoping that I could leave Yunzhou for a few days so that he could regain the right to speak in Yunzhou. Musian seemed to have thought of something when he heard this, and said, do you not care about the power of Yunzhou at all? As long as Yunzhou can be maintained in peace and stability, it is enough. It doesn't matter who holds the power. The princess shook her head gently. Then have you ever thought about what Dapen Emperor will do after he gets the dominance of Yunzhou? Musian asked. The princess's eyes flickered, as if she thought of something that had happened in the past. In the past, for the sake of the elixir, the Dapen Emperor sent many teams to Dai to explore the detailed rules of the Forbidden Land of Life, thus losing many mainstays of Yunzhou. Now that Emperor Dapen has obtained the elixir, will he send people to Dai again in order to find out all the rules of the Forbidden Land of Life? Seeing the princess silently thinking about something, Musian couldn't help turning his head to look at the woman. I have to say that this woman is indeed beautiful. At this moment, she has covered her veil again, and the thin silver-white dress outlines a mature and tight figure like a peach. Under the hem of the skirt, a pair of thin and wholly white silk wraps her plump and slender snow-white legs, and she is wearing a pair of embroidered flat shoes, which is very beautiful. Musian once felt that he liked girls of the same age, then he thought the schoolgirl was good, and then he met the Qing Emperor and made a mistake, he liked Sister Yu instead. But now, he feels that such a mature and enchanting wife is not bad. Although people always say that they like Lolita girls in black and white stockings, and have various hobbies such as foot control, face control, and leg control, etc., to put it bluntly, they are LSP. Musian couldn't help but stretched out his hand to untie the princess's veil, revealing a round, beautiful, charming and mature face. The princess came back to her senses from her thoughts just now and saw Musian's piercing eyes. She seemed to know what he was thinking. She couldn't help but glance at him with her beautiful eyes and said, why do you think so much all day long, doing bad things? It's not that I wanted to do anything bad, I just couldn't help it when I saw the princess's sister. Musian held the princess's hand and said softly. A flash of red cloud quickly passed over the princess's pretty face. What were you thinking about just now? Musian asked curiously. The princess said softly, I think you are right. In the past, I was indeed too easygoing. Emperor Dapen only thought about cultivating immortals and didn't care about the people of Yunzhou at all. If I took the initiative, maybe I would be more considerate of Yunzhou. Better. Musian said no more. He just put forward his own ideas, but the final decision was still up to the princess herself. Moreover, if I take the initiative in Yunzhou, it will be much more pleasant to get along with you in the future, the princess suddenly said again. Musian hesitated and said, what does this have to do with me? The princess suddenly stood up on her tiptoes and gently brought her sexy rosy mouth to Musian's mouth, but she did not kiss her. She just glanced at the boy seductively and said softly, if I take the initiative, do you not have to worry about being discovered when you have an affair in the palace from now on? You can do what you like in the palace courtyard, pavilion, or even the place where memorials are reviewed. The sweet fragrance of the princess sprayed on Musian's face, and there was a charm that made people intoxicated. Do you think it would be pleasant? She asked softly. Musian stared at her seductively, with a deliberately provocative look, and almost couldn't help but suppress her right there. But in the end, Musian suppressed his inner impulse. After all, we are outside here, he has no idea of doing anything weird with the princess outside. The most important thing is, what if I encounter Sister Lingxian near the edge of the restricted area? Then Musian may not be able to get out again after entering the restricted area. The little girl was already showing some signs of darkening. If she saw something bad, she might just say hello to Musian and throw her into the basement. Thinking about it this way, why do you feel that this trip to the restricted area is quite dangerous? Musian thought. What are you doing? At this time, the princess's gentle voice sounded. Musian came back to his senses. He looked at the woman's charming face and thought of her identity as Emperor Dapen's wife. His heart was filled with excitement. He lowered his head and kissed the princess's sexy red lips gently, and said softly, "Nothing. Sister princess, wait for me to come back." The princess finally left the restricted area temporarily under Musian's persuasion. As Musian said, places like the restricted area are too dangerous. Before ascending, there is a risk of falling into a place like the forbidden area. There is no need to take this risk. Moreover, Musian was also worried that if Yalingxian met the princess, he would have some difficulty explaining it. As the princess said, it would be more pleasant for them to maintain an underground relationship. The Dongzhou restricted area is very large, beyond people's imagination. Before the rules of heaven and earth were changed, a monk from the Return to Void realm stepped into it, and ended up getting lost in the restricted area for 3 whole days. On the night of the 4th day, he accidentally received guidance from an expert in the restricted area, and then he a lucky escape from danger. Since then, various legends about the restricted area have spread in Dongzhou. The last time Musian came, Yalingxian was by his side, so he was able to quickly find the core of the penalty area. But this time he went alone and could only rely on his memory to find the way to the depths of the restricted area. If he could step on the void and walk, Musian felt that he should be able to find a way deep into the restricted area, but he was unable to do so. One of the rules of the restricted area, void methods are prohibited. This should be a rule set to worry about those who are willing to use the method of void to escape directly into the depths of the restricted area. Along the way, Musian picked up 4 aurora crystals. If placed in the outside world, such a fingernail-sized aurora crystal can be exchanged for at least more than 500,000 spirit stones. No wonder so many cultivators came to explore the forbidden area despite knowing the dangers. Such a temptation is too great. As long as you pick up even 1 aurora crystal in the forbidden area, you can be worry-free for the next 20 years. But for some reason, Musian felt a little strange. It stands to reason that the aurora crystal fell in such a conspicuous place, why hasn't it been picked up for so long? Unknowingly, it was already night. More than 300 kilometers away from the southern part of the forbidden area, a group of people were talking and laughing around a campfire. Occasionally, the sound of sparks splashing and igniting the cold night. There was a pot on the campfire, and the pot was boiling fresh fish soup. The wind in the forbidden area was very strong at night, but there were mysterious golden talismans on both sides of the campfire to block the cold wind for this small camping site. A woman in a light golden dress sat by the bonfire, her long hair tied up with a black and golden hairpin, her snow-white long legs vaguely revealed under the hem of her skirt. She looked at the orange-red flames swaying in the middle of the night, as if thinking about something. "Your Highness, we have flown along the forbidden area for nearly 300 kilometers, but we still can't see the end. Maybe the elixir of immortality that your Majesty said is just a rumor. If we still can't find it in 2 days, we should set off to return to the palace." Not far from the woman, an old man with a white beard whispered, "The national teacher committed a heinous crime and was arrested. Your Majesty's health is getting worse day by day and his life is in danger, so he puts his hope on the elixir of immortality in the forbidden area, but everyone knows that there is no way out of the forbidden area. You really don't need to follow us to this forbidden place. The old man's name is Zhu Cheng. He went to the forbidden area to seek the elixir of immortality according to the handwritten order of the old emperor of the Dogon dynasty." Among the people near the bonfire, except for 2 children of the current officials, the rest were the guests and attendants of the dynasty, including Princess Yongning, a total of 16 people. 6 people died along the way, including 2 main guests in the Return to Void realm. They all did not know the rules of the restricted area and died suddenly due to the curse. Mr. Zhu Cheng has always taken special care of me since I was a child. In Yangning's heart, you have always been like my family. Although this is the father's handwritten order, it is also because the prince does not want you to stay in the palace that he secretly made some moves. In any case, I can't leave you and others alone. Even in the wilderness, Princess Yangning's demeanor is still elegant. She said seriously, if you can't find the elixir of immortality and the father punishes you for it, I will intercede for you, so everyone should do their best on this trip. Your Highness. At this moment, many people in the team looked at the eldest daughter of the emperor with some emotion. After the fall of the national teacher Gu boxing, the old emperor's spirit became worse day by day. Everyone knew that the Dogon dynasty was about to change the throne. Although the crown prince has been decided, someone spread the rumor that the old emperor intends to reconsider the crown prince. The people present this time will be sent to seek the elixir of immortality, which is actually a power struggle within the palace. Some of them used to support the second prince, while others supported the fourth prince. But this time they were secretly plotted by the crown prince's lineage and ended up in a dangerous place like the restricted area. Even if they leave the restricted area alive in the end, but fail to find the elixir of immortality, they will still be punished. But with this eldest daughter, they can save a lot of punishment. A sickly girl beside Yongning said, there are actually quite a few natural treasures in the restricted area. They may not make you immortal, but they can extend your lifespan. In fact, as long as you find any one of them, it will be enough to return to the palace. Princess Yongning thought about it and couldn't help but chuckled. Miss Lin usually looks weak, but I didn't expect that she has so many ideas. If the prince knew that his father could live another 20 or 30 years, he would probably be desperate. In this world of cultivating immortals, some dignitaries in the palace will practice to extend their lifespans to a certain extent. The prince is now 36 years old. In another 20 or 30 years, tisk tisk, whether he can ascend to the throne is still a question. Zhu Cheng heard this and couldn't help but sigh and said, fortunately, Miss Lin is with us on this trip, otherwise I don't know how many people in our team will die. This sickly girl is the Saint Lin Qiu who returned to Swanyan Palace after the Ascension Conference ended that day. They met the saint on the road. According to her, Swanyan Palace has always had some cooperation with the restricted area, so she knows some of the rules of the restricted area. This time, she entered the restricted area for the purpose of training and seeking something. Lin Qiu showed a charming smile and said softly, it's just a little help, don't take it to heart. After she finished speaking, she looked at the bonfire in front of her with a faint gaze. In the night, her thoughts seemed to drift away. Princess Yongning looked at Lin Qiu. The girl's face was as white and flawless as ice crystal. One hand was holding her knees, and the other hand was holding her cheeks, as if she was thinking about something. Miss Lin seems to have such a wandering mind along the way. Is she thinking about her sweetheart? Princess Yongning suddenly asked with a smile. Lin Qiu woke up and shook her head quickly, I don't have a sweetheart. Princess Yongning smiled but said nothing. Lin Qiu mentioned Musian's affairs several times along the way. With the intelligence of this eldest princess, she could naturally see some clues. Be careful, someone is coming. At this time, Zhu Cheng suddenly whispered that he heard footsteps coming from the distance. Everyone reacted quickly and immediately hid behind the towering ancient trees and blocked their own auras. At the same time, his spiritual consciousness instantly locked onto the person coming. Lin Qiu also looked at her. She was calmer than everyone present. The Swanyan body made her body very weak from childhood to adulthood, but this physique also made her have no rivals in the same realm. As long as she appeared in her, what was in front of her was not the realm of enlightenment, so she was sure to leave. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to offend, I just happened to be passing by. In the dark shadows in the distance, a figure slowly walked towards him. This young man was wearing a black robe, and there seemed to be a black mist surrounding his body, making it difficult to see clearly. That is the secret technique of the southern wilderness. He glanced at everyone and said with a smile, "It's hard to find a safe camp in the restricted area at night. Is it convenient to borrow a place?" As he said that, he took out a jade box from the ring and threw it to Princess Yongning. "Forget it's inconvenient, just treat it as a meeting gift. I hope the girl will accept it." The person who appeared here was naturally Musian. He had already noticed the auras of Lin Qiu and Princess Yongning when he approached here. The reason why he didn't recognize each other immediately was because he noticed something unusual in this team. It's a bit strange that the eldest daughter of the Dacian dynasty's emperor would appear in a dangerous place like a restricted area. Moreover, his natural spirit body has captured the vague murderous intention in two of the team. It is best to wait and see what happens. Yongning glanced at Musian suspiciously and opened the jade box. But a look of surprise immediately appeared on Zhu Cheng's face. Aurora crystal. He knew the value of the Aurora crystal, but he didn't expect that this young man would be so generous and would give such a valuable thing to someone he met for the first time. Zhu Cheng calmed down quickly, pointed to an open space some distance away, and said, "If you don't mind, you can rest there. We will be responsible for your safety tonight. If there is no problem, you can stay." He could feel that the opponent's strength was only average, so it didn't matter if he let the young man stay here overnight. "Thank you, senior." Musian cupped his hands, and then went to the open space to rest alone. At the same time, Princess Yongning looked at the young man's back from a distance, glanced at the jade box in her hand, and said softly, "This young man is either rich or noble, and he seems to be very good looking." Lin Qiu looked at Musian's back for a long time, and then asked, "How did Princess Yongning know that he was either rich or noble? And he hasn't shown his appearance yet." Only the descendants of ancient families can give someone an aurora crystal as soon as they meet. Princess Yongning chuckled softly. "Mr. Zhu Cheng always has a vicious eye when looking at people. He must have guessed this, so he sold the other party a favor. As for appearance." She thought for a while and said, "Although I can't see clearly, his temperament can't be deceiving. I think he should be very good looking." Lin Qiu glanced at the eldest daughter of the emperor who was always elegant. Could it be that Her Royal Highness is tempted? Princess Yongning shook her head slightly, glanced at the girl meaningfully, and said with a smile, "I just felt that you had been staring at him since the beginning, so I chatted a few more words." "Does Miss Lin know him?" Princess Yongning asked casually. Lin Qiu shook his head. "I don't know him." She paused, smiled weakly, and said softly, "And I already have a sweetheart." But while he was talking, his eyes were still looking at the young man from a distance. Her beautiful eyes were full of resentment. 6,000 words completed. Please vote and blade for the new week. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 528. The night in the restricted area is always like this. On the surface, it is as calm as a pool of stagnant water, but in fact, there are always powerful monsters passing by in the dark night. Near the bonfire, this team of 10 people secretly looked at the direction of the young man with a vague look. He seemed to be unprepared when he entered the restricted area. He just took out a golden talisman from the Naja and placed it beside him. Then he closed his eyes and began to meditate. For some reason, Princess Yongning always felt that this boy looked familiar. Although she couldn't see his face clearly, she always felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Protector Zhu Cheng looked at the young man in front of the bonfire and said, "This should be a disciple sent by a certain ancient family for training. Judging from his generous move just now, he should have some status in the family." The young man Ding Ho asked softly, "Do I need to keep an eye on him?" He found that this young man was particularly focused on meditating and practicing. Normally this would be a good thing, but in a restricted area like this, it might not be a good thing to be so focused on meditating and practicing. After all, if you don't pay more attention, the outside world doesn't know when it was attacked by monsters in the restricted area. This is enough to prove that this young man must be a kid from a wealthy family, and he has never suffered anything outside in the past. Zhu Cheng shook his head and said, "Just pay a little attention, but I don't think anything will happen tonight." Ding Ho still couldn't help but look at him a few more times and said, "His skin is even fairer than ours. He probably rarely leaves his family." But as soon as he left the family, he came to a dangerous place like a restricted area. "I always felt a little suspicious." As soon as these words came out, several people near the bonfire couldn't help but look at the young man in the distance. As Ding Ho said, fair and delicate young men like this are so rare that they are almost impossible to see even in places like the palace. Compared with the noble temperament of this handsome young man, even they, the heirs of powerful people in the palace, seemed a bit dim. Lin Qiu just hugged his knees and sat by the campfire, staring at him silently, as if his eyes were involuntarily attracted and refused to move away. However, his body was always shrouded in hazy black mist, making it impossible to see his true appearance. Under the reflection of the bonfire in the dark night, he seemed to have a bit more mystery. "Brother, what do you think he looks like?" A girl walking beside her gently pulled the sleeve of a man in the team and asked in a low voice. "Why are you thinking so much? No matter how good looking you are, how can he be as good looking as the son of Duke Qingguo that our father arranged for you before? You don't even have a crush on him, so there's no need to think about this person," the young man said earnestly. "Besides, even if he is a descendant of the Huanggu family, his status in the family will definitely not be high if he is sent to a place like the restricted area. I'm just asking out of curiosity. I don't really like him." The girl curled her lips dismissively. But his eyes were involuntarily attracted to the young man. At the same time, a female cultivator from the Dacian dynasty in the team also looked at her silently. In the past, she always thought that no matter how good-looking the men in this world were, they were just that, but when she saw the boy, she moved a little bit. "Don't look away." Several male cultivators present felt that something was a little strange. A young man who had just arrived here not long ago actually attracted the attention of several members of the opposite sex inexplicably. The black mist on his body should be some kind of rare secret technique, and he doesn't seem to travel far away often, and he seems to have a lot of treasures with him. Ding Ho suddenly said in a low voice. As the cold wind blew by in the night and the bonfire swayed, Zhu Cheng suddenly warned in a low voice, "No matter whether the other person is from the ancient family or not, don't have any ideas about him, and don't be greedy. In a place like the restricted area, you must know there are people outside the world." There was one more thing Zhu Cheng didn't say. He couldn't see the young man's state. At first, when he saw that the boy was so young, he thought that he was simply using secret techniques to cover up his own realm. But now that he saw that the other party concentrated on meditating and practicing so quickly, he suddenly felt that he couldn't see through the other party. After all, to concentrate entirely on meditation in a dangerous place like a restricted area is either a fool, or someone who has enough confidence in his own strength. Maybe it's not because of the secret technique, but maybe it's because the young man's realm is higher than his, so he can't see through the other person. Although this possibility is relatively small, their mission on this trip is extremely heavy and they cannot take any risks on other things. Ding Ho nodded lightly. "Don't worry, I know that our purpose of this trip is to find the elixir of longevity, and the other point is to ensure that Princess Yongning is escorted back to the palace smoothly." When he said this, he stood up and walked to the side of the peerless emperor's eldest daughter, and said respectfully, "Your Highness, can the Aurora crystal given by the young master just now be inspected by your subordinates?" As if he was worried about Princess Yongning's overthinking, he added again, just to ensure the safety of your highness. Yongning smiled and nodded, with a pleasant voice, that's troublesome. Ding Ho took the jade box and took out the aurora crystal in the jade box and flipped it up and down a few times. This aurora crystal is translucent and prism-shaped, and it seems to be intertwined with thousands of golden threads, shining brightly in the dark night. After examining it for a long time, Ding Ho put the aurora crystal back into the jade box and said, "No problem, this is indeed the aurora crystal, and there was no tampering inside." This young man is really generous to give such a rare treasure. As soon as they met, he couldn't help but sigh again. Huh? Miss Lin, do you know him? Why did you take the initiative to talk to him? At this time, someone hesitated and couldn't help but say. You know, this saint of Swanyan Palace rarely communicated with others along the way. In everyone's impression, she was a very shy and arrogant girl, but no one expected that she would take the initiative to talk to a boy who ventured into the restricted area. Princess Yongning looked at the scene and said calmly, "Don't discuss what you shouldn't discuss." Lin Qiu walked slowly towards Musian, then took out a jade bottle from the ring and handed it to him. Even if you follow the rules in the restricted area, you will still be affected by the curse to a certain extent. When you feel unwell, take this pill, it will purify the curse on you. Musian slowly opened his eyes, glanced at the girl, and smiled, "I won't stay in the restricted area for a long time, so you should keep this pill." Lin Qiu looked at the boy closely. Although he deliberately lowered his voice, she recognized the owner of the voice at the first time and said, "Since it is not needed, forget it. I wonder what your name is." Musian said, "Niushi." Lin Qiu couldn't help laughing out loud, glanced at the boy, and chuckled and said, "Mr. Mu, how long are you going to pretend?" Niushi, is this a temporary name that is directly separated from Mu and Ji? The girl stared at him straight from beginning to end. Her frail appearance and weak eyes made people feel pity for her. "How did you get into the restricted area?" Musian asked helplessly. He had clearly used the secret technique of the southern wilderness to cover up his own aura and even his face, but Lin Qiu still noticed it directly. His acting skills should be at the level of an actor. How could this girl be so sharp, Musian thought. When the saint of Swanyan Palace reaches adulthood, she will receive a task. Only after completing the task can she officially inherit the position of the saint, Lin Qiu said in a voice transmission. "And my mission this time is in the restricted area." Musian showed a look of realization, and asked in a voice transmission, "Have you completed your mission?" Lin Qiu smiled and nodded, "Completed. I originally wanted to leave, but I happened to meet the team of the Dogon dynasty on the way. I had met Princess Yongning several times at the Ascension Conference before, so I went with her." "Is that so?" Musian looked thoughtful. "Why did Mr. Mu deliberately conceal his identity? Are you hiding from me?" Lin Qiu's weak tone suddenly became a little more uneasy, peeking at Musian's expression. But unfortunately, because of the black fog, she couldn't see Musian's expression at all. "My concealment of my identity has nothing to do with Miss Lin." Musian shook his head and said in a voice transmission, "I just want to see what tricks the Dogon dynasty is playing. By the way, Miss Lin, do you know why Princess Yongning appeared here?" Lin Qiu thought for a while and replied, "According to them, it was the crown prince who framed other party members to prevent future troubles and wait for the death of the Dogon emperor to succeed to the throne smoothly. As for Princess Yongning, she couldn't bear to see these important officials in the court being killed, so she went with them. I tried it yesterday. Princess Yongning looks like an ordinary person to the outside world, but there is spiritual energy flowing in her body, at least in the realm of refining spirits." Musian thought for a while and suddenly chuckled. Thanks to Lin Qiu, some of the problems that had troubled him before gradually became clear. "Mr. Mu, what are you laughing at?" Lin Qiu asked. Musian shook his head, took out a nourishing pill from his ring and put it into his mouth, then sat down next to a big rock and said softly, If nothing unexpected happens, you will know soon. Lin Qiu looked at Musian, a little puzzled. She was about to speak, but at this moment, a sound like breaking wind suddenly came from the distance, accompanied by a surge of spiritual energy. The spiritual energy was so amazing that even at a long distance, people couldn't help but feel a little palpitating. There are cultivators coming towards us, everyone be careful, Zhu Cheng reacted and shouted loudly immediately. As soon as the voice fell, several cultivators in black robes in the distance had turned into long rainbows, surrounding the team in front of the campfire. Zhu Cheng's eyes changed slightly, and he immediately warned everyone, they are people from the restricted area, don't have any conflict with them, let's see what they are going to do first. Everyone heard this and suppressed the idea of escaping from here. Lin Qiu whispered, Mr. Mu, wait, stay with me. They won't hurt you. Musian glanced at Lin Qiu subconsciously and hummed softly. There were nearly 30 Imperial guards in the sight of everyone, of which Musian felt that there were more than 6 people in the Return to Void realm, and the other cultivators held black chains, emitting a biting cold. Musian could feel that the chains seemed to have the effect of sealing spiritual energy. This should be the Imperial guards that Sister Lingxian mentioned before. Musian remembered some things that Ye Lingxian had told him about the forbidden area before. Imperial guards, this name is also very famous in the ears of cultivators outside, because this Imperial guard has killed countless people and is one of the most effective forces in the forbidden area. From the past to the present, there have been many monks exploring the gold panning in the restricted area, and for most monks, the restricted area will not pay attention to it. But if some monks violate the rules of the forbidden area, they may be surrounded and suppressed by the forbidden army. This time the Imperial Guard came to visit late at night, and I am afraid that the visitor is not a good person. Zhu Cheng looked at the deputy commander of the forbidden army who was leading him, cupped his hands, and said humbly, I don't know if this commander is here tonight, but what's the matter? The deputy commander of the forbidden army said coldly, we received news not long ago that someone violated the rules in the southern part of the restricted area, so we were ordered to come and investigate. Zhu Cheng was startled, is there some misunderstanding? We and Her Royal Highness have always abided by the rules of the forbidden area and have never violated them. Moreover, if we really violated the rules, we would have been punished by the forbidden area long ago, and we would not be able to wait for you. Come here, right. The deputy commander of the Imperial Army did not look at Zhu Cheng again, but walked straight to Princess Yongning, raised his hand and grabbed it, and the jade box was sucked into his hand the next moment. After opening the jade box and taking a look at the items inside, the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army sneered, these people are very suspicious, take them away together. We are from the Dacian dynasty. You have to tell us clearly what crime we have committed, right? Ding Ho was detained by 2 monks, but he raised his head unconvinced and stared at the deputy commander of the Forbidden Army with anger in his eyes. The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army raised the Aurora crystal in his hand and snorted coldly, this Aurora crystal is naturally produced, and it has always been divided into 2 types, one has not been contaminated by the curse, and the other, it looks like an Aurora crystal, but it's actually a cursed crystal. If you take this cursed crystal out of the restricted area, it will probably affect the lives of tens of thousands of creatures in Dongzhou. I suspect that you are undercover agents sent by the demon world to cause trouble in Dongzhou, and I decided to take it back for review. Do you understand? Aurora crystal? Ding Ho subconsciously looked at Musian and said, this Aurora crystal was given to Her Royal Highness the Princess. Was it you? Was you the one who designed to frame us? For a moment, everyone looked at Musian, with expressions of surprise, anger, or disbelief. If the Aurora crystal I gave you is really a cursed crystal, there is no way I wouldn't be able to detect it, Musian replied calmly. Although his natural spirit body is a pseudo-physique, how could he not be able to distinguish between cursed crystals and Aurora crystals? The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army glanced at Musian, and soon his eyes fell on Lin Qiu. His tone softened a bit and said, "You are the saint of Swanyan Temple, right? This matter has nothing to do with you. After this, we will personally escort you out of the restricted area." Lin Qiu looked at Musian and said, "He is my friend and a monk from Dongzhou. He has nothing to do with the demon world." The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army glanced at Musian without leaving a trace, and quickly glanced at Ding Ho again, smiling. "Swanyan Temple is an ally of the Forbidden City, so we believe in the saint, but the saint's friends, sorry for the disrespect, we will investigate as soon as possible to clear his name. Take away." The deputy commander of the Forbidden Army raised his hand, and a group of teams from the restricted area behind him stepped forward to shackle everyone's hands. Musian stretched out his hand and let the shackles restrain him, but deliberately slowed down a bit, glanced at Ding Ho, who was being held at the end, and the other monk next to him, and asked through a message, "Are you here? Are you kidding?" Ding Ho frowned slightly and said, "You designed to frame us, and now you want to shift the blame onto me. The Aurora crystal I gave to Princess Yongning was found in the forbidden area. If there is a curse, I would have noticed it already. I'm afraid you secretly switched the package. If I were not here during this trip, you would have changed the way to get the cursed crystal. Give it to Princess Yongning, right?" Ding Ho was silent for a long time, then the corner of his mouth curled up with a hint of success, and he said through his voice, "You are right, the Aurora crystal you gave me was secretly replaced by me. But I can only blame you for being so unlucky that you have to follow Her Highness the Princess. So, let's go on the road with this secret. So what if the other party knows?" At that time, so many people watched Musian give the Aurora crystal to Princess Yongning, and the other party could not argue. Originally, he was still thinking about how to put the cursed crystal into the princess's ring along the way, but the appearance of this young man solved his troubles. Therefore, it can only be said that the other party is too unlucky. "Let me guess who ordered you to do this." Musian thought for a while and asked, "Are you from the prince's side? But why would you attack a princess? Is it possible that the prince is still worried that his throne will be threatened by the eldest daughter of the emperor?" Ding Ho said nothing, but a coldness flashed in his eyes. "For the mission of the prince, you even risked your own life. If you are captured by the people in the restricted area, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave in a short time," Musian continued. Ding Ho said calmly, "You don't need to worry about this. Compared to me, you should worry about yourself first. Thanks to you, I was originally thinking about how to give the cursed crystal to Her Highness the Princess without being suspected. I didn't expect you to come and help me with this big favor." Ding Ho showed a smile. Musian looked at him calmly and said nothing. There are a total of 18 areas in the restricted area, and each area is governed by a different forbidden army. At this moment, Ye Ziyuan, the commander of the Forbidden Army in Area 3, was looking down at the case file when he suddenly heard the voice of a secret agent coming from outside the door. "Sir, according to the original plan, Princess Yongning and others have been captured. However, among the people they were traveling with at that time was the saint from the Swanyan Temple. The younger one has temporarily placed her in Area No 3. Ye Ziyuan nodded with satisfaction and said, "You did a good job. Please step back now. I will handle the rest." After speaking, he took out a storage bag from the ring and threw it to the secret agent. "Take it to reward the brothers in charge of this operation. Think of it as an extra reward." The secret agent took the storage bag respectfully, said yes, and then left the place. Then, he immediately ordered, "Go and prepare. Tonight I will personally interrogate these people who plan to cause trouble in Dongzhou." "Are you going tonight?" The servant on the side hesitated. "When you accept people's money, you have to do it neatly," Ye Ziyuan said calmly. 30 million spiritual stones, this is the reward received from the Dacian dynasty. For a behemoth like the restricted area, 30 million spiritual stones are nothing, but for a small commander of the forbidden army in the restricted area, it is a reward that cannot be refused. Therefore, When Ye Ziyuan received the transaction letter before, he immediately accepted it happily. After all, with the existence of a restricted area, even if the Dacian dynasty knew about the matter afterwards, it would be impossible for them to come to investigate. These 30 million spirit stones are no different from being given away for free. After finishing cleaning up, Ye Ziyuan immediately took the people away and went to the prison in Area 3. At this moment, two bright and moving figures suddenly flashed before his eyes. Lord Yesiu, Lord Saint. Ye Ziyuan reacted immediately, stopped immediately, raised his hands and bowed. Yesiu held Ye Lingxuan's arm, looked at the big man with a pair of bright peach blossom eyes, and said with a smile, "Do you want to go out so late, Commander-in-Chief?" Ye Ziyuan said respectfully, "It's like this. Today, several monks who planned to use the cursed crystal to cause trouble in Dongzhou were captured near the restricted area, so I plan to go and interrogate them personally. The last time someone came up with the idea of a cursed crystal was 200 years ago, right? There are actually people who are not afraid of death who come to the restricted area to look for this thing." Yesiu blinked her beautiful eyes and said, "How about I go take a look with the commander? I want to see who is so brave." This. Ye Ziyuan hesitated for a moment, then lowered his head and said, "Yes, that humble duty will lead the way for you. Everyone in the restricted area knows that Yesiu is eccentric. If she rejects her, she might go there by herself. In this way, there will be more variables." Yesiu looked at Ye Lingxian and asked, "Do you want to go shopping with your sister? Just think of it as a way to relax." It has to be said that when viewed up close, the beauty of this forbidden saint is really stunning, and the complicated and gorgeous purple dress adds a bit of classical beauty to her. The pure and classical girl in the past has gradually become a beauty that will captivate the whole country. Go on your own. The recent inheritance ceremony has been tiring enough. I want to go back and rest, Ye Lingxian said lightly. She paused and continued, "Besides, I have no interest in the evil people who cause trouble in Dongzhou." Yesiu curled his lips, "It's boring, then I'll go by myself." She turned around and walked toward prison number 3 with brisk steps. Ye Ziyuan came to his senses, bowed respectfully to Ye Lingxian, then lowered his head and led the way. After Ye Lingxian watched the two people leave, she raised her right hand, and a golden chain quietly came out of the cuff along the white wrist. She was about to leave on the mount woven by the locks of desolation, but as if she thought of something, she suddenly asked, "Let me see what Musian is doing now." The lock of desolate time immediately turned into a painting floating in the air. In fact, Ye Lingxian doesn't like to peek into other people's private lives, and seeing that the inheritance ceremony in the restricted area is about to begin, it will be useless even if she sees the scene. After all, she can only see but not touch, which will only make people feel lonelier. Especially the thought of her beloved brother Mu being intimate with other women, this would make her feel jealous and powerless. I wonder which vixen brother Mu is with this time. Ye Lingxian sighed softly and looked at the picture scroll presented by the lock of desolate time casually. What appeared in the scroll was a dim scene. Ye Lingxian narrowed her eyes and stared at it for a long time, feeling a little hesitant in her heart. This is a prison? Was Brother Mu locked up in a small dark room by Yao Meng or someone? At this time, the thoughts in Ye Lingxuan's mind suddenly stopped, and she stared doubtfully at the prison shown in the scroll. Why does this place look so familiar? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 529. Musian sat cross-legged in the prison with his eyes closed, circulating the spiritual energy in his body one after another. Although he is now at the peak of the return to void, he has directly skipped the process of cultivation and reached the peak of the return to void, so it still takes some time to stabilize. Not far from the prison, Princess Yongning and several people from the Dagon dynasty were imprisoned. Lin Qiu was not among them. She was well settled in the restricted area by the Imperial Guards and was sent away after the incident was resolved. After all, the Swanyan Palace is a force second only to the restricted area, Yaokai and Lianji section. Although the restricted area is strong, it will not offend a top force in Dongzhou for no reason. Compared with those people in the Dagon dynasty team who looked worried or angry, Princess Yongning looked very calm, and the prison where she was imprisoned was also much cleaner. Obviously, the people in the Imperial Guards recognized her identity. So we shouldn't have let a stranger into the camp from the beginning. We should have thought that in a place like the restricted area, how could someone send an aurora crystal worth hundreds of thousands of spirit stones for no reason? At this time, an indignant voice suddenly came from the prison. Mr. Zhu Cheng was right before. No one can be trusted in the restricted area. We don't care, but it's hard for Her Royal Highness to suffer with us. Some people whispered in the prison one after another. At this time, Princess Yongning suddenly said softly, "Everyone, be quiet." Although the tone was very calm, for some reason, when the eldest princess spoke, the whispers of the crowd suddenly became much smaller. Princess Yongning said calmly, "Didn't Marquis Ding confirm that there was no problem with the aurora crystal in my jade box before? Why did the Imperial Guards find that this crystal was a cursed crystal just now? Mr. Ding is well read. Didn't he notice it at the time?" She looked at Marquis Ding in the prison opposite with her beautiful eyes and asked. Ding Ho was startled, then lowered his head and said, "Your Highness, although I have seen the aurora crystal, I didn't know that there are variants of the aurora crystal. I have heard of the name of the cursed crystal in the past, but I have never seen it, so I didn't recognize it. It's better to say that this person is too insidious and cunning. He actually gave the cursed crystal as the aurora crystal to frame us." Not far away, Zhu Cheng saw that everyone looked angry after he finished speaking, and his eyes couldn't help but have a little more satisfaction. But soon, he found that the eldest princess frowned and thought about something, and couldn't help asking, "Your Highness, what are you thinking about?" Princess Yongning glanced at Musian, who was meditating with his eyes closed not far away, and said calmly, "Nothing, don't doubt anyone before the truth comes out." When she said this, her eyes couldn't help but secretly look at the boy in the prison. At this time, Princess Yongning had already guessed the identity of this person. Lin Qiu's attitude towards him, as well as his words, deeds and temperament, were exactly the same as the person she knew. At this time, Musian opened his eyes and said in a teasing tone, "Your Highness has been staring at me since just now. Could it be that you are thinking about how to find me and avenge today's frame-up if you can leave this place later?" Princess Yongning smiled at him and also said in a voice, "I believe you are innocent. How did the Imperial Guards find our location so accurately, and know so accurately what was in the jade box in my hand? This alone is enough to prove that this matter has nothing to do with you. Maybe I am colluding with you from inside and outside." Musian couldn't help but laugh. Princess Yongning raised a faint arc at the corner of her mouth. "With your status and position, if you really want to wipe someone out, do you need to use such a despicable method, Master Mu?" Musian was stunned, and then he soon felt a little frustrated. Is my disguise so bad? He found that none of the women he knew around him were good people. Even Princess Yongning, who rarely left the palace, recognized his identity so quickly. "It's not that your disguise is bad, but the temperament of Master Mu can't be imitated by anyone in the world, so it's easy to recognize." Princess Yongning chuckled. "What temperament?" Musian asked subconsciously. "Peach blossom luck, or, the temperament that attracts women," Princess Yongning said. Musian understood that the temperament that Princess Yongning said to attract women probably refers to the aura emitted by the nine-tailed sky fox and the natural furnace cauldron. Even if he deliberately restrained himself, he would still emit such aura all the time. "Who do you suspect?" Seeing Musian was speechless, Princess Yongning couldn't help but ask again. "Do you believe me when I say it was the guards around you?" Musian asked. "You mean, Marquis Ding?" Princess Yangning's eyes flickered, and she whispered to herself, "Why? He shouldn't have such a motive." "He doesn't have such a motive, but there are others in the palace who have such a motive." Musian smiled. Princess Yongning was not an ignorant person, so she naturally guessed something. She frowned slightly and said, "Prince. But I have no intersection with him on weekdays. Why would he?" "For no reason. Everyone in Dongzhou knows that the throne of the Dagon dynasty is about to change, but there are also rumors that the position of the crown prince is about to change. Among the princesses and princes of the Dagon emperor, only the fourth prince can be considered a smart man." Musian paused and continued, "In the past, people often said that if Princess Yongning of Dagon was not a woman, the position of the crown prince would have long been taken by Her Royal Highness. But this is ultimately the perspective of the common people. In fact, if Her Royal Highness inherits the throne, I'm afraid few monks will object." Princess Yongning frowned slightly and said in a voice transmission, "Are you making fun of me, Mr. Mu? There has never been an example of a woman as emperor in the dynasties of Dongzhou. Men can be emperors, but why can't women? Does Princess Yongning think that women can't? When can women really stand up?" Musian was trembling with anger. "Yongning. In fact, only the dynasty of Dongzhou is like this. The medicine emperor of Yuzhou and even the queen of the demon realm of Bizhu are all empresses." "Princess, have you ever seen anyone question it?" Musian quickly said seriously. Seeing Yongning silent, Musian suddenly asked, "You will follow the team in person this time? In fact, you also have the idea of becoming an emperor, right?" Yongning smiled lightly and said, "The fourth prince Ningping has several cultivators in the Return to Void realm to support him. Needless to say, the crown prince has the most powerful power in the dynasty. Master Mu thinks that even if a weak woman like me has such an idea, can I really compete with them for the throne? If I really inherit the throne in the future, I am afraid that I will be harassed by many cultivators in a short period of time." "What if I am your backer?" Musian suddenly asked. Princess Yongning was stunned for a moment, as if she did not expect Musian to say such a thing. "You and I have only met a few times, why would Master Mu be willing to help me?" Musian said calmly, "The fortune of the Dagon dynasty will affect the entire Dongzhou to a certain extent. In the past, the emperor of Dagon was incompetent, but no one took action against him. The main reason is that the national fortune is behind him. If you take action against him, you will be eroded by the national fortune. No one is willing to endure this erosion for no reason, not to mention that doing so will damage the fortune of Dongzhou. The current prince is better at playing some small tricks. He may be a smart man, but this kind of person is suitable to be a counselor, but not suitable to be a wise ruler." He said at this point, he paused, stared into Yangning's eyes, and said seriously, "I hope to help your highness for the sake of the people of the world, and I have no other ulterior motives." Princess Yangning's beautiful eyes were shining with a strange luster. After being silent for an unknown period of time, she nodded reservedly, "I will consider what Master Mu said today." At this time, an inappropriate and faint laugh came to Musian's ears. "I know you must be thinking that if you have a chance to get out of this prison, you must seek revenge on me, right?" Musian returned to reality from his previous thoughts and looked at the owner of the voice inadvertently. Marquis Ding. He was holding in front of the prison door at this moment, but he looked at Musian with a playful smile. Although Musian and Princess Yongning used the means of sound transmission just now, the two of them exchanged glances for no less than 10 times. Marquis Ding was watching from the side and could naturally guess a rough idea. It goes without saying that this young man might have complained to His Royal Highness the Princess. But what the young man didn't know was that it would be useless even if he complained. "The Imperial Guards are all my people now, what can you use to fight me?" The reason why Marquis Ding spoke now was because he had heard the footsteps coming from outside the prison door. Marquis Ding had to admit that the young man's mentality was indeed good. If he hadn't already greeted the commander of the Imperial Guards in advance, he would probably be in a panic now that he was imprisoned in such a place, but the young man looked like nothing had happened. But it was true that after being imprisoned in a place like the restricted area, there would be no other means of self-rescue except self-destruction. But he was different. "Don't worry, Your Highness, I will definitely find a way to save you after I leave this place." Marquis Ding sent a message to Princess Yongning. His purpose this time was actually not entirely for Princess Yongning, but mainly to purge the party members who were hostile to the prince. Princess Yongning was just a byproduct. Yongning raised her eyebrows slightly, looked at Marquis Ding deeply, and didn't say a word. But Marquis Ding frowned as he watched this scene. It seems that the young man said something bad about him when he complained to the princess. But it doesn't matter, he will soon be unable to say anything. The Aurora crystal given to Yongning came from this young man, so he is the most suspicious, and no one will suspect him, Marquis Ding. Maybe he can take this opportunity to get the credit for rescuing the princess. Marquis Ding raised his head and looked at the iron tower-like commander of the Imperial Guards outside the prison, and was about to speak out the explanation he had prepared. However, at this time, he found that the commander of the Imperial Guards did not take another step forward after entering the prison, but bowed his head respectfully. "Is this prison number 3? This is my first time in such a place." At this time, a clear and pleasant girl's voice sounded in the prison. The girl's hair was combed into 2 ponytails, swaying with her steps, and her bright and beautiful eyes looked around curiously, quirky. Judging from the status of the commander of the Forbidden Army, it seems that only the senior officials of the Forbidden Army can make him salute like this respectfully. "Yes, you." Ding Ho reacted almost instantly and almost blurted out. "Yes, you. She is the biological sister behind the restricted area." Ding Ho had done enough homework before setting off to the restricted area on this trip. Naturally, he also knew how important the other party's identity was in this restricted area. But why would she appear in a place like this? Before Ding Ho could figure out the situation, he saw Yesiu suddenly stop and turn his head to look behind him suspiciously. "Eh? Lingxian, didn't you say you are not interested in this kind of place?" Almost at the moment she spoke, the previous whispers in the prison fell silent. The soldiers guarding the prison looked at each other, and they all saw surprise and excitement in each other's eyes. Ye Ziyuan, the commander of the Forbidden Army, almost blurted out, "Saint, why are you here?" At this moment, Ye Ziyuan did not realize the seriousness of the problem. He just thought that the saint was busy with inheritance matters during this period and planned to relax tonight. Ye Lingxian glanced at him and said calmly, "I suddenly became interested in this case, so I came here to understand the situation. Don't worry about me. Just do your thing." When Ye Lingxian said this, he walked along the corridor of the prison. The natural spirit body caught a certain aura almost at that moment. The girl suppressed her inner excitement and shuttled through the prison until she finally stopped in front of a certain prison. Then, she glanced over her shoulder casually. But this glance made Ye Lingxian's eyes freeze slightly, staring at the young man in the prison. Ye Ziyuan lowered his head and followed Ye Lingxian not far behind, then secretly met Ding Ho's eyes, and then raised his hands and bowed, returning to the saint, "I already have a general understanding of this matter. It was the little monk next to you who secretly planned and found it. He found the cursed crystal in the restricted area and then gave it to Princess Yongning, intending to put the blame on her, but it is not ruled out that this person has other accomplices in the crime, so it needs to be investigated." Ye Lingxian withdrew her gaze and asked softly, "Is this matter confirmed?" "Yes, the truth is almost certain, but the details of the incident still need to be investigated. In short, this person is definitely involved." Ye Ziyuan paused, lowered his head and said respectfully, "So my subordinates will personally interrogate this person next. I believe the truth will come to light soon." The girl in a gorgeous purple skirt was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Ye Zhaoyuan doubtfully. You mean, he found a cursed crystal in the restricted area and framed the blame on others, intending to cause trouble in Dongzhou? Ye Zhaoyuan hesitated for a moment. For some reason, he felt an indescribable sense of disobedience in his heart. But since he had already said the words, it was naturally impossible for him to go back on his words. He immediately said, "That's exactly it." Ye Lingxian looked thoughtful. "In that case, let me personally interrogate this person. The saint's status is so noble, how can I bother you to do such a thing?" Ye Zhaoyuan was startled, and then said urgently, "What's more dash?" Before he finished speaking, Ye Lingxian turned to look at the commander of the Forbidden Army, with a cold light in his eyes. "From tomorrow onwards, Ye Qiliang, the captain of the number 3 Forbidden Army, will assume the position of commander. After tonight, Ye Zhaoyuan will be taken into custody by the Qiliang army. Thoroughly investigate how many outside monks he had colluded with and how many spiritual stones he had embezzled during his tenure." Ye Zhaoyuan's expression suddenly changed, but he dared not speak out in anger, and whispered, "I have done something wrong, I hope the saint will tell you." However, Ye Lingxian ignored it. The lock of desolate time cut the chains on the prison at that moment, and then left with the young man in the prison. Yongning is the princess of Daqian after all. "It's not appropriate to stay in a place like this," Muzian said in a message. Ye Lingxian paused slightly and said calmly, "Place Princess Yongning in the guest room of Qingtian Palace and treat her well. Once this matter comes to light, send her out of the restricted area." Ye Zhaoyuan watched blankly as Ye Lingxian and the young man following her left. In just one night, he suddenly changed from the leader of the Forbidden Army to a prisoner. This fact was hard to accept no matter what. Ye Xiu narrowed her eyes, stared at the young man suspiciously for several times, and suddenly said in a clear voice, "Don't you investigate the person's background before you imprison him. The commanders of the Forbidden Army are more or less greedy for spiritual stones. As long as it does not affect the overall situation, they will turn a blind eye." But this time the commander of the Forbidden Army accidentally hit the muzzle of the gun, then he could only admit that he was unlucky. Background. Ye Zhaoyuan stared at the young man's leaving back and murmured, his eyes full of confusion. Then, combined with Ye Lingxian's sudden visit just now, her sudden change in attitude, and the way she looked at the boy just now, after putting all this together, Ye Zhaoyuan was almost stunned for a moment, and subconsciously said, "Muzian. That's right, other than him, who can let the princess in the restricted area personally come off the field to lead people? After all, anyone can cause trouble in Dongzhou, only Muzian can't. After all, everyone in Kyushu knew that there was King Di, the human emperor, behind him. And all this, in the final analysis, must be blamed on Ding He." At this moment, Ye Zhaoyuan was filled with regret. It's not that he hates Muzian, but he hates Ding He. Before putting the blame on others, he didn't even investigate the identity and background of the other person, and dragged him into the water. "What are you still standing there for? Do you want me to arrest him and put him in jail?" Ye Xiu asked with a strange look at the imperial guards standing aside. Several people reacted immediately, took out the black shackles, and imprisoned the desperate Ye Zhaoyuan in jail. What happened tonight soon spread to all parts of the restricted area, and the restricted area tribesmen were discussing this matter everywhere. This may be a big shock to the people below, but to Ye Xiu, it seems to be just a sparse and ordinary little thing. Compared with this little thing, she is more concerned about Ye Lingxian. I wonder how the future queen of the restricted area plans to interrogate the prisoner. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 530. That night, Ye Lingxian brought Muzian to his dormitory. She sat on the desk behind her and looked at the boy in front of her. "Brother Mu, don't you have anything to explain?" the girl asked expressionlessly. Muzian was startled, and then said, The one I originally gave to Princess Yongning was indeed the Aurora crystal, but it was later replaced by a cursed crystal by another one of them. You know that's not what I asked. Ye Lingxian glared at him dissatisfied and said softly, didn't you agree before that you would follow me back to the restricted area? Why did it take so long? I later went to Yunzhou to prepare the heavenly materials and earthly treasures for the Enlightenment realm. Muzian gestured to the black chain on his hand and said, can you untie this thing first? Ye Lingxian hummed softly. This was one of the secret techniques in the forbidden area. As a saint in the forbidden area, she naturally had a way to remove it. However, just when Ye Lingxian was about to untie it, his movements suddenly stopped, and his eyes flickered, staring at Muzian. What's wrong? Muzian felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by the girl, so he had no choice but to take the initiative to ask. The girl sat on the long table behind her, surrounded by golden chains. She could only see a slender and elegant figure, and her eyes that seemed to have a bit of joy. It's nothing. Brother Mu will explain it first and go to Yunzhou. Just untie it after whatever you want, it won't affect your actions anyway. Muzian thought for a while, seemed to understand something, and said hesitantly, did you spy on me? Ye Lingxian was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't expect Muzian to be so perceptive. Did that bad woman who had an affair tell you? An affair? It has nothing to do with the princess. Muzian's eyes were filled with doubts. You really used the lock of time to spy on me, right? Ye Lingxian remained calm and composed, speaking very sternly, no, this is just a simple guess. Brother Mu went to Yuzhou this time just to create a furnace. The medicine king of Yuzhou has a close relationship with the princess of Yunzhou. I think if she sees you, she won't let you go easily. Compared to this, what do you plan to do when Brother Mu comes to the restricted area this time? You seem to have not yet realized the truth, right? As if worried that Muzian would continue to ask questions, Ye Lingxian quickly changed the topic. Muzian glanced at the girl calmly, knowing that she was deliberately changing the subject, but without revealing it, he said, have you heard of the flower of the avenue? Ye Lingxian frowned slightly and asked doubtfully, what is that? She has not inherited the memory of the reincarnated queen, so naturally she does not know what the flower of the avenue is. After all, even in the restricted area, very few people knew about this magical medicine. Muzian thought for a moment and asked, is our father free recently? I want to see him. Ye Lingxian couldn't help but rolled her eyes at Muzian speechlessly. If the owner of the restricted area hears Muzian call him this, I'm afraid he will feel very strange. My father has been in seclusion for more than a month. Even the inheritance ceremony was presided over by my mother. But according to my mother, he will be released from seclusion within half a month, Ye Lingxian said. Muzian hummed thoughtfully, and then, as if he thought of something, he asked, did your father go into seclusion just after you and sister Ye came back? Ye Lingxian glanced at Muzian in surprise, how did Brother Mu know? Really? Hearing Ye Lingxian's answer, Muzian couldn't help but show an interesting smile and murmured to himself thoughtfully. He knew that there had been some disputes between the restricted area and the Leaf clan in the past. This time the owner of the restricted area would retreat, probably because he had not yet figured out how to face the beautiful ancestor of the Leaf clan. Even though Ye Qingxin didn't care that the restricted area was later separated from the Ye clan, the owner of the restricted area still had some knots in his heart. Compared to this, why did Brother Mu come to the restricted area before he realized the truth? Did he encounter some trouble? Ye Lingxian asked curiously. If he had followed the previous plan, Muzian would have waited until he successfully passed the heavenly tribulation of enlightenment in Yuzhou before leaving. However, it was a bit strange that he had already appeared in the restricted area at this moment. Muzian smiled and stretched out his hand to rub Ye Lingxian's head, and whispered, I want to see you, can't I? There was a hint of joy in Ye Lingxian's eyes, and she lowered her head shyly. After the two chatted in the room for a while, A smile gradually appeared on Ye Lingxuan's innocent and pretty face. By the way, I may have to stay in the restricted area for a few days. I want to see your father after he comes out of isolation. Ye Lingxian hummed softly and said, I understand. I will make arrangements for Brother Mu after my father comes out of confinement. Can you remove the secret technique from Nanhuang first? I can't even see your face. Although his hands are bound by black shackles in the restricted area, it is still very simple for Muzian now to remove the secret skills of the southern wilderness. When the black fog dissipated, Ye Lingxuan's eyes immediately fell directly on Muzian. She is as rich as jade, and her temperament is inexplicably charming. For a Huaichun girl of this age, Muzian's appearance completely matches all the girl's thoughts, and her speech and behavior are even more like that of a noble prince, with a luxurious elegance. As the princess of the restricted area, Ye Lingxian had seen many young talents in the past, but she had never cared about them. Maybe he can be compared with Muzian in appearance, but his temperament is far behind. It was obvious that Muzian had not spoken yet, but when Ye Lingxian looked at this fair and delicate face, her eyes seemed to be sucked, staring straight at him. Muzian naturally noticed Ye Lingxuan's gaze and couldn't help but feel amused. From the moment he followed Ye Lingxian into the dormitory, his eyes could not help but glance at the girl, because Ye Lingxuan's dress today was still a little different from the past. Tonight, Ye Lingxian is wearing a gorgeous purple skirt that has been carefully cut, which highlights the girl's graceful figure. Under the skirt, she wears a pair of lavender boots. The space between the boots and the skirt is just right. The whiteness of the girl's beautiful legs. Muzian has actually seen a lot of people dressed like this, but Ye Lingxuan's almost perfect figure seems to make her a little more elegant and noble that other girls don't have. A robe of green silk draped over her slender and graceful waist like a waterfall, making her look even more pure and lovely under the candlelight. At this moment, the elegant girl was staring at the boy with clear eyes, which seemed to be filled with affection. But yes, after all, he and Ye Lingxian have wanted to meet for a while. The girl has been busy with the inheritance ceremony, so she must be under a lot of pressure. Thinking of this, Muzian couldn't help but reach out and gently rub the girl's hair, and said, You have worked hard for the inheritance ceremony these days. Ye Lingxian shook his head gently, This is something I have to face sooner or later. It's nothing hard. Compared to this, Brother Mu has a harder time. After all, in a place like Yuzhou where people are unfamiliar, I'm afraid we encountered a lot of trouble, right? Ye Lingxian looked at him with a smile. Why does it sound so weird? Muzian smiled casually, I encountered some minor troubles, but the senior medicine emperor treated me pretty well, so he always protected me. Bless. I'm afraid it's not just a blessing, right? After hearing Muzian's words, the girl looked well behaved on the surface, but in fact she was thinking of what she had seen through the lock of desolate time a few days ago. Not only the medicine emperor, but also the Daipen emperor's wife seems to be somewhat involved with Brother Mu. It's late tonight, so I won't disturb your rest for now. I'll see you again tomorrow. After chatting tenderly with Ye Lingxian in the room for a while, Muzian stood up and planned to leave. However, at this moment, he suddenly heard the sound of chains intertwining and colliding behind him. The lock of desolate time. Muzian reacted almost instantly and turned his head suddenly to look, only to see that the lock of desolate time in mid-air had turned into an afterimage and appeared in front of him. The golden lock tilted his head, as if to say, finally got something to do? Sister Lingxian, do you have anything else to do? What are you doing with the lock of desolation time? Realizing that something was not quite right in the atmosphere, Muzian had a calm expression on his face, but in fact he was panicking in his heart. Seeing that Muzian seemed confused, Ye Lingxian showed a charming smile and said softly, Brother Mu, just rest in peace and deal with your own affairs. Lingxian will always guard you silently, you think I would say that, Brother Mu? The princess in the restricted area raised her lips, and her pure and lovely appearance now had a teasing smile like a little devil. She stepped forward and approached Musian. Musian subconsciously took half a step back, but his heels he happened to hit the door behind him. In the end, Lingxuan's delicate body just pressed him in front of the door behind him. She raised her hand and gently caressed Musian's face. There seemed to be a smile flowing in those magnificent lavender eyes, and she said softly, "I took Brother Mu away tonight in front of so many people. If I let Brother Mu leave without interrogating him at all, I'm afraid people in the restricted area will think that I am bending the law for personal gain and ignoring the rules of the restricted area, right? This will always be difficult to convince the public." This was obviously just an excuse. Given Lingxuan's status in the restricted area, everyone believed that she could not lie about such a trivial matter. Not to mention the restricted area method, if you want to find out whether a person is lying, there will always be a way. Lingxuan's fingertips gently stroked Musian's face, and the slender fingers gently touched the face, bringing a slightly cool touch, with a charm that seemed to tug at the heartstrings. She whispered, "By the way, let's give Brother Mu a hint. Sister Kingdi has arrived in the restricted area today, right?" Musian was surprised. "Yao Mang? Why did she come to the restricted area?" He has obviously never revealed his whereabouts. Could it be that Yao Mang sensed the mark on the Qinglian ring? "She's here to see Qian'er." Lingxian didn't explain too much, she just raised her hand and touched the young man's face. There seemed to be seductive charm flowing in those magnificent purple eyes. So dash. She stood on tiptoes, gently put her pink and attractive mouth close to Musian's ear, and then said softly in the cold voice she usually used when ordering her subordinates, "Brother Mu, you don't want Sister Kingdi to find out that you are being bullied, right? Where did you learn this kind of N.T.R exclusive noun?" Musian couldn't help but be stunned. The next moment, the golden light of the lock of desolate time enveloped the entire dormitory. Time pauses at this moment. Lingxian took Musian's hand to the soft edge, and then sat with her legs crossed, her delicate white feet wrapped in pure white stockings. She swung her boots and looked at the boy secretly. Musian had to admit that this girl was indeed becoming more and more beautiful, and her figure was gradually approaching that of a queen, but at this moment, she still had the unique purity of a girl. Between the boots and the hem of the skirt, the dazzling white calves were exposed, and the texture of ice crystals was revealed under the candle light. "What's wrong, Brother Mu?" Lingxian deliberately tilted her head and asked in confusion. Musian retracted her gaze, "Nothing." Sensing the boy's eyes, Lingxuan's mouth corners slightly raised a happy arc. Through the way to control your husband, she already knew Brother Mu's XP. Sensing the girl's playful eyes, Musian coughed lightly and said, "By the way, as you said just now, I am also a prisoner, right? Is it okay for you to take me out of the prison openly?" Lingxian curled her lips and said lightly, "Brother Mu can't be a prisoner. If you want to cause trouble in Dongzhou, it might be easier to join the demon world directly than to secretly give cursed crystals to others," she said with a smile. "It's actually nothing for a cultivator at the peak of the return to void to join the demon world. But Musian is different. Even if we ignore his strength and natural furnace body, his existence alone in the demon world is enough to give the whole Dongzhou a headache. And no matter what, it is impossible to let Brother Mu stay in prison and suffer," Lingxian added again. "In fact, I don't mind it very much. It's good to be able to practice quietly in prison." Musian shrugged. Lingxian glanced at the boy, "Isn't it because Princess Yongning can chat with you in prison?" Musian shook his head, "Princess Yongning and I can only say that we have met a few times, and I have no relationship with her. That's only now, maybe in the future." When Lingxian said this, she suddenly sighed softly, "But tonight, in order to rescue Brother Mu, Lingxian has been under a lot of pressure. If he hadn't seen with his own eyes tonight that the Imperial Guards released Musian without saying a word, Muzian might have really believed the girl's lies. Ya Lingxian paused and continued, "So Brother Mu, you have to compensate me." "What compensation do you want?" Muzian asked. Ya Lingxian landed lightly from the table, put her hands behind her back, and came to Muzian. Her pleasant voice with a hint of charm sounded in the bedroom. "Brother Mu will keep pleasing Lingxian until I am satisfied, how about it?" Yeqian sat in the room to meditate and practice as usual today. The people in the restricted area obviously knew her relationship with Ya Lingxian, so they always took good care of this girl and gave her a lot of pills every time she practiced. After the spiritual energy circulated in her body for a big cycle, Yeqian opened her eyes and looked at the green skirt fairy sitting in front of the bed in surprise, and said in surprise, "Master, why are you here?" "I'm tired of staying in Yaokai, so I came out to relax and come to see how your practice progress is now," Yao Meng said with a smile, looking at his disciple. Yeqian thought about it, and suddenly wondered, could it be that something happened to Brother Mu? But didn't he go to Yuzhou? Could it be that Master went to Yuzhou before and saw Brother Mu with other women, so he was a little upset? Seemingly noticing that Yao Meng's expression was a little complicated, Yeqian immediately comforted her, "But Master, you don't have to think too much. You just sent Brother Mu to Yuzhou so that he could protect himself, it's nothing. I didn't expect that there would be a day when I would be comforted by my disciple." Yao Meng couldn't help but smile, "I didn't come to see you for your Brother Mu's matter. I just want to take you back to Yaoqi after your sister's inheritance ceremony is over, and accept the inheritance of the Tiandan Phoenix tree." Yeqian was startled, "But I'm not a disciple of Yaoqi, wouldn't it be against the rules to do this?" She knew that the Tiandan Phoenix tree was the symbol of Yaoqi, and almost every disciple of Yaoqi would get inheritance from the Tiandan Phoenix tree, and how much you can get depends on your talent. "You are my disciple anyway, and you are also a member of Yaokai, so don't worry about it." At this moment, a deafening thunder tribulation sound suddenly came from the north of the restricted area. That place was far away from the restricted area, but Yao Meng still caught it in the first time. That was the pill tribulation. Has Luo Tan started to refine the Juding Liangxu pill? Yao Meng whispered to himself. "Is it the pill that Brother Mu needs?" Yeqian asked. Yao Meng smiled and nodded, gently stroking Yeqian's head, and said softly, "You should practice well first. If you have any questions, you can ask me at any time." "Where are you going, Master?" Yao Meng's green eyes revealed a faint smile, looking in a certain direction of the restricted area, and whispered, "Well, go out and relax." At the same time, in the Yuzhou Palace, tens of thousands of kilometers away from the restricted area, a woman in a snow-white dress was standing in front of the cauldron, and the vigorous fire in the cauldron was burning. The princess was standing not far from her. Today, she was wearing a gorgeous double-breasted blouse embroidered with plump crabapple flowers, which perfectly matched the beautiful and plump princess, outlining her full and upright chest and slender waist. The princess's beautiful eyes, like clear water, lingered on the cauldron for a long time, and praised. It is said that there is nothing in the world that the all things transformation cauldron cannot refine. Today, I see that this thing is indeed the ancestral weapon of Yuzhou. Ancestor weapons are weapons that the great masters of the Hedao realm have spent a lot of effort to nurture, and Luo Tan's all things transformation cauldron is rumored to be able to perfectly refine even immortal medicines, and then refine immortal pills. Now it seems that there is such a possibility. Luo Tan did not answer, and her attention was completely focused on the cauldron in front of her. After 2 hours of refining, although the pill calamity has passed, in order to make the effect of the pill reach the extreme, she will naturally not relax now. Boom! Accompanied by a roar, Luo Tan slowly opened his calm eyes. A round pill flew out of the all things transformation cauldron and fell into Luo Tan's hands. "Is he still in the restricted area?" Luo Tan asked. The princess hummed softly, The shielding spell cast by Linglong on him will be lifted when he is enlightened and the heavenly tribulation descends, but if Linglong can enter the state of feathering before that, perhaps the problem can be solved. Luo Tan frowned slightly. If it was so easy to feather, it would not be that only the Green Emperor and the Sword Palace Master successfully feathered and ascended in Zhuzhu for so long. Linglong is involved in the Great Dao. If she has not communicated with the Great Dao, it is probably difficult for her to feather and ascend. Luo Tan shook his head gently. That's why he went to the restricted area, the princess said. I can't help Linglong, but the flower of the Great Dao in the restricted area can help her. Luo Tan nodded thoughtfully, and then suddenly froze, looking at the princess with doubt. Is your attitude towards him a little too good recently? She was worried that the princess would accidentally expose the relationship between Musian and her. The wife of the great Peng Emperor has an extremely close relationship with another person of the opposite sex. It would be troublesome if it got out. Don't worry, I know my limits. The princess smiled brightly. After he successfully attains enlightenment, I will return to Yunzhou to concentrate on handling government affairs, and wait to take him to Yunzhou for a tour in the future. Luo Tan was speechless for a moment. I shouldn't have let you pay attention to him in the first place. If it weren't for the princess, after Musian attained enlightenment, she would be able to enjoy the natural furnace of the Yahua realm alone. Even without me, do you really think you can enjoy the cake alone? The princess showed a playful smile on her face. I wonder how many people are waiting for him to attain enlightenment now. Luo Tan was silent. It's really a headache. I finally fell in love with a man, but this man's natural furnace made him destined to be noticed by countless female cultivators. As if she knew what Luo Tan was thinking, the princess showed a gentle smile. In fact, you don't have to worry. The person who should really worry should be Qingdi. After all, on the surface, she is the one who has been married to Musian. Luo Tan thought about it, and it seemed to be the case. She is the one who is cuckolded. Why should she worry about those women targeting Musian after his natural furnace is exposed? The one who should be worried should be the Qing Emperor. What are your plans next? The princess suddenly asked. Luo Tan thought about it and smiled, thinking about it carefully. It seems that I haven't been out for a while. Tomorrow I will go to the restricted area in person to give him the elixir and greet the restricted area. That night, the lock of the wild time was floating in the air. Time was stagnant, and Musian was lying on the bed thinking about life. Ya Lingxian, who was beside him, was nestled in the arms of the boy, like a clinging cat. If the tribesmen in the restricted area saw this scene, they would probably be shocked. The cold and elegant princess of the restricted area would actually be so clingy in private. Sister Lingxian, if you let me out like this, will it have any impact on your inheritance ceremony? Musian suddenly asked. However, there was no response after a long while. Asleep. Although the girl had just been shouting that she was dying, she was the reincarnated queen after all, so she shouldn't be so tired that she needed to sleep, right? Musian looked down and found that the girl was leaning on his arms, but she didn't move at all. The wind outside blew through the curtains, but the bed curtains froze in the fluttering, as if even the wind was condensed. A fresh and charming fragrance came. Don't shout, only you can move freely in this bedroom, and the time of other things is suspended. Yao Meng sat on the bed and smiled at the boy. Her fairy posture was moving. Her tall and graceful figure was looming in the fairy mist, and her holy and seductive voice was a little playful. Are you surprised? Why are you looking at me with such a surprised look? Musian was obviously stunned. Isn't the time here frozen by Sister Lingxuan's desolate time lock? Why are you here? Musian asked in disbelief. She hasn't inherited the handover ceremony of the reincarnated queen yet, so I froze her pause time again. Yao Meng said with a smile, but it seems that I am still a step late. Your natural furnace seems to have consumed a lot of spiritual energy. I paused your pause time. Is there any other way to play? Musian didn't know what to say for a while. When did you know that I came to the restricted area? Musian asked in a low voice. I noticed it when you entered the restricted area, but I was talking to Chiener at that time, so I didn't come to disturb you. Yao Meng said to herself, after you reach the state of enlightenment this time, the matter of the natural furnace cauldron is likely to be exposed. I'm afraid the cultivators outside think I'm worried about this matter. After all, the temptation of the natural furnace cauldron is hard for any female cultivator to refuse. She paused and deliberately said, even a married woman would find it hard to refuse your natural furnace cauldron. This was obviously a joke about the princess. Even Musian, who has always been as calm as an old dog, was panicked when he heard this and said, sorry. He thought Yao Meng would be angry about what happened in Yuzhou during this period, or would come to settle accounts with him. However, whether it was because Yao Qi practiced the way of meditation or something else, Yao Meng's answer was beyond Musian's expectations. It's okay. I don't really care about you being intimate with other women. Looking at Musian's surprised expression, Yao Meng's mouth curled up with a frivolous arc. So you don't have to worry about what will happen if someone discovers your natural furnace during the tribulation. Just rest assured to survive this enlightenment tribulation. You don't care about my intimacy with other women. Musian still looked at Yao Meng in disbelief. In fact, in the past, Musian always felt that a woman like Yao Meng was an impeccable and perfect lover. As a result, what she said tonight, although it seemed to expose a shortcoming, but for a man, this seems to be a perfect advantage. At least that's how it is for Musian. You wish. Yao Meng rolled her eyes at Musian, but a slight arc appeared on the corner of her mouth. I know what happened to you in Tianqian City in the past, so I don't care about your intimacy with other women, but the premise is that you are intimate with them with my knowledge. Musian understood that for Yao Meng, there are actually two kinds of being cheated, one is physical and the other is mental. If she knows about it, it doesn't matter, but if he does it behind her back, that means he cheated on her mentally and physically. The situation is completely different. This time Yao Meng went to the restricted area to see Yeqian just to find out what his XP is like. I may need to make some preparations before I can realize the Tao. Musian said, after entering the peak of returning to the void, I feel that my breath is a little unstable. It may take some time to stabilize, otherwise there may be hidden dangers in the future, and it may be difficult to merge with the Tao or even ascend to the stage of Yahua in the future. Yao Meng thought about it and smiled quickly. In fact, it is not difficult to ascend to the stage of Yahua. Musian couldn't help but look at this fairy twice more. Even Yao Meng had gone through so much trouble to ascend to Yahua. And now he is acting like a Versailles. You won't be able to ascend to Yahua in a short time anyway. She glanced at Ye Lingxian, who was leaning on Musian's arms, and gently stroked the girl's cheek. Then, she sat down next to the boy casually. Before Musian could speak, Yao Meng looked down at him, and her long black hair gently brushed across his arm, itching and carrying a faint fragrance. She leaned down, gently touched the boy's lips with her fingertips, and whispered, "But, you have another way to ascend to Yahua." "What method?" Musian was doubtful. Yao Meng glanced at the boy with a charming look, and her soft body gently pressed down, just leaning on his arms with Ye Lingxian on the left and right. Accompanied by the charming voice that sounded in the bedroom. "I'm at the Yahua realm, idiot." When you saw the title, did you think for a moment that you had skipped a few hundred chapters? By the way, today is nearly 8,000 words, sneak peek. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 531. I have to admit that this woman can always capture Musian's XP inexplicably. Just like this time, it was just a few simple words, but he couldn't help but be tempted. There is nothing we can do about this. She was so hot. In fact, not only Yao Meng, but now even Ye Lingxian seems to know his XP and can always tug at his heartstrings unintentionally. It was as if someone was secretly observing Mu Xian's every move, and then wrote a guide about his preferences and distributed it to the fish around him. Mu Xian was filled with emotion. What are you thinking about? Yao Meng covered her chest with one hand, gently played with the boy's forehead with the fingertips of her other hand, and asked with a smile. There was a slight blush on her face, but there was a bit of satisfaction on her face after being moisturized. Mu Xian came back to his senses, glanced at the still wind outside the window, then glanced at his shrunken body, and hesitated. Can you let me return to my original state first? A charming smile bloomed on Yao Meng's beautiful face, and she smiled. Don't you think you are cuter now? Although she said this, she still raised her fingertips. The flow of time caused Mu Xian's body to pass quickly, from the original ignorant boy to a handsome young man. Yao Meng, who can now perfectly control the principle of time, can independently turn back time on Mu Xian or restore it to its original state. Feeling the abundant strength brought by returning to his original state, Mu Xian stretched his waist and said immediately, I was suddenly thinking about Ling just now. Yao Meng narrowed his eyes. You mean the elixir that can affect the avenue, the flower of the avenue? I know the purpose of your coming to the forbidden area this time is for it, but after I have seen the forbidden area before, even she doesn't know what the flower of the avenue is. Mu Xian was surprised. Isn't the fairy medicine a restricted area? Why haven't they seen it before? Yao Meng did not answer, but changed the question. Do you know what the predecessor of the restricted area is? Right. It used to be one of the 9 taboo places in Kyushu, but doesn't it mean that the current restricted area is built on the taboo place? Mu Xian said hesitantly. He found it a bit incredible that after being in the restricted area, he didn't know what the elixir was and where it was hidden. The predecessor of the restricted area is indeed a forbidden place in Dongzhou, but do you know who was the first owner of the restricted area? Yao Meng said, the forbidden place in Dongzhou was the most powerful in Kyushu at first, but it was also the most unlucky. Since its birth, it has been liquidated by more than 3 Hedeo powers. The first one to suppress the taboo the people in the land are unknown, and the second one is the ancestor of the Blue Clan. As for the third one, actually you have heard her name. The reincarnated queen. Mu Xian's eyes moved slightly, so the earliest owner of the restricted area was actually the reincarnated queen. The reincarnated queen is just practicing in the forbidden land, waiting for the arrival of the next life. In fact, the person who later perfected the rules of the forbidden land is the current owner of the forbidden land. Yao Meng whispered, but when it comes to the flower of the avenue, I'm afraid the owner of the restricted area doesn't know about it, otherwise he would have brought the elixir to see the Emperor of Medicine. I guess before he stepped into the restricted area, the elixir would have been if it is taken away. Even if it is not there, it must be hidden in a place where even the great power of Lian Hideo cannot detect it. So the people who know about the flower of the avenue, I think, are at most the 3 people who first suppressed the restricted area. Mu Xian thought for a moment, so, maybe the only ones who know where the flower of the avenue is hidden are the ancestors of the Blue Clan and the reincarnated queen. After all, there are only 3 people who know the whereabouts of the flower of the avenue, and the identity of the first person to step into the restricted area is now a mystery. He may have died long ago. Judging from the timeline, there has been an immeasurable time gap between the first people to suppress the forbidden land and the current Dongzhou. 100,000 years? Hundreds of thousands of years? Mu Xian didn't know. But it is impossible for the Hedeo realm to exist in the world across the long river of history. The only thing that can survive in the world is the emergence. However, I'm afraid there was no Ascension realm at that time. At this moment, Yao Meng suddenly said, I think that person may still be alive. In a place like the Forbidden Land, even if a powerful Hedeo person steps into it, there is a risk of falling, because it is impossible for the Hedeo realm to escape from the rules of heaven and earth, so, people who can suppress the 9 taboo places can only it could be feathering or even above that. Musian frowned and thought. Yes. He ignored the fact that the reason why the forbidden place is called forbidden is because the rules of this place are different from those of the outside world, and the powerful Hedeo will also be affected by the rules in the forbidden place. Then the only person who can suppress the forbidden land is the Ascension realm. Because there are ancient creatures sitting in the forbidden land, and these ancient creatures are not affected by the rules in the forbidden land. The strength of the ancient creatures in the 9 forbidden lands is immeasurable. When Musian just thought of this, the thoughts in his mind suddenly stopped. He turned to look at Yao Meng and asked in a low voice, "You just said that there are only 3 people who know about the flower of the avenue. But the princess also told me before the matter of the flower of the avenue." Yao Meng explained, "The princess was born connected to the Dao, so she can be said to be omniscient and omnipotent in a sense. However, she is still in harmony with the Dao, so many things she knows are very vague. So, I need to ask the reincarnation queen, or go to the Blue Clan," Musian said to himself. It's impossible to go around the world looking for the person who suppressed the forbidden land, right? Yao Meng thought for a moment, looked at the girl next to him who was still leaning on Musian's arms, and smiled. "The reincarnation queen is in the restricted area. You can start with her first, maybe you can find the answer." The reincarnation queen next to Ye Lingxian inherited the memory of the previous 8 lives, so it is very likely that she knows the whereabouts of the flower of the avenue. Musian nodded gently, he was still thinking about what Yao Meng had just said. There are only 3 people who know the flower of the avenue. The princess is omniscient and omnipotent to a certain extent because she is connected to the avenue. He seemed to have thought of something, and his expression suddenly stagnated. "I'll let time return to its original state now," Yao Meng said, but found Musian's abnormality, frowned slightly, and asked, "What's wrong? Did you think of something?" Musian didn't answer, but was stunned for a long time before muttering in a low voice, "It turned out to be her." "What are you talking about?" Yao Meng asked in confusion. Musian came back to his senses, shook his head and smiled, "It's okay, you can unfreeze the time." He paused, subconsciously glanced at the girl in his arms, and asked, "By the way, aren't you going to leave here first?" If Ye Lingxian found out that her brother Mu was getting close to the woman she hated the most in her bed, Musian felt that even if he found the flower of the avenue, it would be a problem whether he could take it out smoothly. Yao Meng showed a playful smile, "You really take care of the princess of the restricted area. I can leave here first, but I have a condition." She gently stroked the boy's face and smiled gently, "If you don't want your sister Lingxian to find out tonight, come to see me alone tomorrow night." The happiness brought by the green man always makes people full of joy. Musian was stunned, and then said helplessly, "This is a restricted area. There are Lingxuan's people everywhere. If you are discovered, you can naturally leave, but I will be in trouble." Yao Meng smiled lightly, "This is also to train your anti-reconnaissance ability. I will wait for you in the guest room tomorrow night." She was shrouded in a faint glow. The next moment, the green dress covered her smooth and tight skin, and her long hair was scattered straight like a waterfall. She glanced at the stagnant time and snapped her fingers. Time began to flow. Ye Lingxian frowned slightly and slowly opened her eyes. She lazily raised her eyes and looked around. The thin white inner garment wrapped around her delicate body, and her fluffy and messy hair set off her pure and pretty face. She seemed a little confused. Was she asleep? Why did it feel like she had just had a long dream? Ye Lingxian felt a little confused. As long as the mental strength was sufficient, she could stay awake all the time, let alone her. As a result, she was sleepy after such a short time. The bedroom was quiet in the dark night, and no sound could be heard. In the air, the golden light of the desolate time lock enveloped the entire bedroom, freezing the time. The golden light illuminated the girl's pretty face, making it look particularly sacred and charming. She raised her head slightly, looked at the boy in front of her, and asked softly, "Brother Mew, how long did I sleep just now?" Muzian thought for a while and said, "About half an hour." Yalingxian frowned slightly and said to herself, "Did you really fall asleep? It's really strange. I don't feel very tired." Yao Meng froze the time that the desolate time lock had previously paused, but Lingxian seemed to still be able to feel the abnormality. Muzian thought to himself, a little surprised. But think about it, it's true. Both of them control time, but Lingxian has not yet developed into a great shark, so she is definitely not as good as Yao Meng in the theory of time. Muzian reached out and gently stroked Lingxuan's head, saying softly, "You have been busy with the inheritance and succession during this period. Even if your body is not tired, you must pay attention to your spirit and don't put so much pressure on yourself." The warmth of the palm gave people an inexplicable sense of peace, and the girl couldn't help but close her eyes slightly and immerse herself in it, leaving the doubts in her heart behind. "Well, I understand." She raised her beautiful eyes and stared at the boy quietly. "Brother Mew, you should take care of yourself." She deliberately emphasized the words "take care of yourself." Obviously she was very dissatisfied with Muzian's closeness to other women recently. I know. You need to take care of yourself when you are close to other women, but not when you are with Sister Lingxian." Muzian pinched the girl's soft little hand and smiled. "Do I need to pay more attention to my body when I am with you?" As if she heard something behind Muzian's words, a blush flashed across the girl's pretty face. She curled her lips and said, "I won't treat Brother Mew like other women." As she said, she added, "I have something to deal with later. Brother Mew can meditate and practice in my room later. After all, I just brought you out of prison. If I let you go so soon, I'm afraid the tribesmen will think that I am deliberately protecting you. Well, so you should stay with me for the next few days. I will protect your safety." "It sounds like I am being kept by you." Muzian smiled. Lingxian covered her mouth and chuckled, then glanced at Muzian. "It's not impossible. If Brother Mew stays in the restricted area, I can give you 1 million spiritual stones every month from now on. Then forget it. If I really let you take care of me, everyone will probably look down on me in the future." Muzian shrugged. Lingxian frowned slightly. "Who dares to look down on Brother Mew? Even if you ignore Brother Mew's talent, with your intelligence, you can still provide me with a lot of advice, and you can always stay with Lingxian, so 1 million soul stone is nothing. I want to be your personal attendant, right?" Muzian said with a teasing smile. Lingxuan's brows soothed. "It's not impossible. I won't let Brother Mew do dangerous things, as long as he stays with Lingxian. After all, Brother Mew is the only one beside me now." The girl's tone suddenly became much lower. "I never thought that I would be able to rely on Brother Mew one day." Muzian heard the worry in the girl's words. "What's wrong? Is there someone else competing with you for the position of the master of the restricted area?" Lingxian snorted softly. "Of course. After all, I am not the only young genius in the restricted area. My father can't help me openly just because I am his daughter, right? Other forces in the restricted area have been in these years. They are all developing well, and they all support their own children, but I am the only one." When the girl said this, her originally clear and beautiful eyes suddenly dimmed a bit. Paired with her pretty innocent face and lightly biting her lips, the princess of the restricted area looked helpless and weak at this moment. This was the first time that Muzian saw the proud princess of the restricted area showing such an expression. He couldn't help but feel soft in his heart. He stretched out his hand to hold the girl in his arms and said softly, "Don't worry, I will help you." Lingxuan's eyes instantly glowed with hope, and she raised her face. "Really? Does that mean Brother Mew won't leave Lingxuan's side?" Muzian hesitated for a moment, then hummed softly, I will stay here with you until you inherit the throne. The reserved and elegant girl had affection in her eyes. She gently leaned her forehead against Musian's chest and whispered, "Brother Mu is the best." At the end of the sentence, a cunning look flashed in the girl's eyes. Even the princess of the restricted area, who used to disdain palace fighting, after this period of beating, realized that she could no longer be the innocent little white rabbit she used to be. Tenderness is meaningless. After being tender in Musian's arms for a while, she seemed to have thought of something. The girl suddenly asked suspiciously, "Speaking of which, what is the relationship between the Swanyan Temple Saint and Brother Mu? I seem to have never seen you mention it before, but she seemed very worried when you were imprisoned today." There seemed to be a bit of danger in the words. "I saved her once before when I was in the Sword Palace. Maybe Miss Lin pays more attention to kindness, so she is worried about my safety," Musian said with a smile. But Lin Qiu didn't expect that the restricted area would be Musian's second home. "That's it." Ye Lingxian hummed slightly and didn't ask any more questions. He just looked at Musian more suspiciously. She was a natural spirit. Even though the surface of Musian's natural cauldron had the shielding technique left by the spirit dragon, she still noticed that the heavenly spiritual energy in Musian's body was consuming a lot. It stands to reason that they only played a little bit 3 times tonight. It shouldn't cause the loss of heaven's spiritual energy to be so exaggerated. Musian said calmly, "Since you have something to do, go ahead. I will meditate and practice for a while to consolidate my current furnace. We can't continue chatting. This girl's ability to catch someone seems to be getting stronger and stronger. If we continue chatting, her secret will be exposed." Musian suddenly felt that he was under great pressure. Originally, Ye Lingxian and Ye Qian were both little girls who could be coaxed quickly, but now, their elder sisters have gradually moved closer to the great white shark. Ye Lingxian hummed slightly, turned and left the room. She did not leave immediately. After closing the door, she came to the central courtyard outside the dormitory. Then, her originally well-behaved and innocent expression soon became a bit colder. "What's the matter?" Not far from Ye Lingxian, Sister Sanwu with disheveled hair was standing quietly, her tone calm and calm. "It's okay, I'm just guarding the door so that no one will notice what's going on here." Ye Lingxian looked at her doubtfully. "Even if someone discovers that I have slept with Brother Mu, it won't be a big deal, right? After all, everyone in the restricted area knows about their relationship. It doesn't matter under normal circumstances, but has Miss forgotten what you said when you returned to the restricted area?" the reincarnated queen said. "After you saw Musian's intimacy with other women through the lock of desolation time, you once said angrily that you didn't like Musian, and you would not pay attention to him even if he came to the restricted area. If you are seen at this moment, being with him and being very close to him, I'm worried that the young lady will have trouble with her face when facing her clan members in the future." Ye Lingxian was startled. Only then did she realize that she had said such words before. For a moment, the girl looked a little uncomfortable. She coughed lightly and pretended to be calm. "What do you know? This is just to make Brother Musian relax and be careless. After he is intoxicated by my charm, I will just put him in a small dark room and pour out all his dissatisfaction." The reincarnated queen tilted her head and looked at her. "Is that so? But why do I feel that you are intoxicated by Musian's charm?" "That's your illusion." Ye Lingxian looked indifferent. "But tonight you clearly shouted to Brother Mu to love me well, something like that." Ye Lingxian. She glanced at Sister Lenjian with embarrassment, who didn't understand the meaning of getting off the steps at all. "That's also one of the tactics. How can you, a doll who doesn't understand emotions, understand my thoughts? What do you mean when you say you will pour out all your dissatisfaction on him later? Torture? Or do you mean to condescendingly ask him to help you take off your shoes and play a couple's game like?" "I am more inclined to choose the second option, because you read it before in The Way to Manage a Husband that some men like their feet, and at that time you made special notes on that page. The courtyard fell into silence for a long time. Under the night, Yelingsuan's innocent and pretty face was covered with an intoxicating blush, and she glared at this cold and charming lady. Am I the master or are you the master? There are some words that should be hidden in your heart and never spoken out, so as not to make people angry. She knew that although the reincarnated queen always followed her like a shadow, with an air of nothingness, she actually had feelings for the other person, but she usually would not take the initiative to express them. The reincarnated queen opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but she still held back. Yelingxian nodded with satisfaction and continued, Brother Mu will stay at least until I inherit the position of queen of the restricted area. During this period, you can try to cause some trouble for me so that I can discuss the solution with him. To deepen feelings. The reincarnated queen looked at her master silently, speechless. Isn't this request too difficult? There are 3 major forces in the restricted area. This time, there are indeed people among the 3 major forces competing with Yelingxian for the position of the leader of the restricted area. However, not long ago, 2 major forces surrendered, the situation has become completely one-sided. As a result, the lady now asked her to help create some difficulties. Yelingxian raised her arrogant snow-white chin and said calmly, all men have self-esteem. If I had just asked Brother Mu to stay with me, he might not have agreed, even if he finally agreed because of my request. He will be here, so we have to give him something to do to satisfy his sense of accomplishment. The book Yudeo of the Master said that men are very strange creatures. Sometimes they like strong women, and sometimes they like girls who are petty and carefree. I used to think that this was much harder than practicing cultivation. But now that I think about it, it's all about improvisation. Although your strength is stronger than mine, I'm afraid you still need to learn more about the ways of the world. The reincarnated queen's cold eyes, which were always emotionless, were rarely flashed with some emotional fluctuations. She said to herself thoughtfully, well, so the Qing emperor has mastered Musean psychology, and he was able to control it just at night. He's very good at it. Yelingsuan's indifferent expression froze, and she raised her head, just now. The reincarnated queen glanced at the girl silently, no wonder, don't you know about this? I was still wondering why you smiled so happily when you came out. But I clearly froze time just now. Yelingxian muttered to himself. The reincarnated queen explained, the Qing emperor used the principle of time to freeze your frozen time, and then in your bed with your brother Mu. Seeing the disbelief on Yelingsuan's face, the reincarnated queen said calmly, rather than competing with me, Master, it would be more practical to think about how to keep your brother Mu in the restricted area. It took a while for Yelingxian to come back to her senses, and her pupils gradually lost some of their luster. What are you going to do next? Do you need me to keep Musean in the restricted area for you? The reincarnated queen asked. Yelingxian glanced at the woman indifferently. I know you are counterattacking what I said just now, that you don't understand the world, but even if you understand feelings, you don't understand the relationship between men and women. Why should you let Brother Mu stay? Or are you planning to let him stay in the restricted area physically and mentally? Even I can't think of any good solution in a short time now, let alone you. The reincarnated queen raised her eyebrows slightly, and stood with her long legs intertwined. Her cold and beautiful face was always emotionless. When you watch the way to control your husband in the room every night, I am also watching next to you. What do you think? I also know all the theoretical knowledge, and I don't think it is difficult to keep him physically and mentally in the penalty area. It's just that I'm worried that if he immerses himself in my charm after this, you might blame me. Yelingxian raised her magnificent purple eyes, stared at the woman in front of her, and said calmly, if you really have the ability to make Brother Mu immersed in your charm, then just try it. I won't stop you, and I won't do it afterwards. Blaming you will only recognize your ability. The reincarnated queen said calmly, then you can take a closer look through the lock of desolate time. I will keep his body and mind in the restricted area. Ya Lingxian chuckled. She knew how hard it was for Brother Mu to control her. Even the arrogant Ya Lingxian was a little frustrated when facing him, let alone a reincarnated queen who didn't understand the relationship between men and women at all. If you can do it, you can try it, she said lightly. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 532. The Presbyterian Church is a force that exists in almost every ancient family, and the restricted area is no exception. The Presbyterian Church in the Forbidden Area is divided into three types of forces. The wife of the owner of the Forbidden Area belongs to one of them. The forces in that group are all supporting the sister of the Forbidden Area. Yesiyu will inherit the position of the Forbidden Area in the future. The second largest force originally supported Yeqing and Yeshui, the granddaughters of the second elder. However, the two sisters were not too stubborn about the position of the master of the restricted area. In addition, they had a good relationship with Ya Lingxian, so he voluntarily gave up the fight and instead supported Ya Lingxuan's succession. The third largest force belongs to the emerging radical faction, which advocates the expansion of the restricted area. It is also the most advantageous contender in this competition with Ya Lingxian. According to the original plan, there will be a large-scale hunting event in 7 days. That is also the time when the younger generation of inheritors will first emerge. Miss, you must seize the opportunity this time. This hunting event is of great importance. The winner may be able to get the support of the great elder. In the presbytery, a female elder warned warmly. The great elder of the restricted area plays a very important role in the restricted area. Although he is usually inconspicuous, even the owner of the restricted area will give him 3 points of courtesy, and his status in the Presbyterian Church is even more highly respected. It is said that this is a living fossil from the same era as the Lord of the Forbidden Zone. He has lived from 10,000 years ago to the present, and even gave the chance of harmony in that life to the Lord of the Forbidden Zone. Somewhere on this long table, a girl in a purple skirt sat with a dignified and elegant posture, but her expression looked distracted. It seemed that he didn't even know what the female elder said just now. This made all the elders feel a little more confused. As the biological daughter of the Lord of the Forbidden Zone, there is no doubt about Ya Lingxuan's strong bloodline and talent. As for Ya Lingxuan's worries about being indecisive after taking office, they have long since disappeared after getting along with the girl in those days. Although the saint is usually elegant and polite when dealing with her elders, she is also decisive in making some decisions, and she is the purest bloodline in the restricted area. There is no doubt that if you want to maintain the strength of the penalty area, Ya Lingxian is the most suitable person for this position. This is why most elders in the Presbyterian Church support young girls. She possesses the calmness and charm that a leader should have, and she can always put forward her own unique opinions during the usual elders' meetings. But today, this was the first time they had seen the saint distracted during a meeting. And he frequently lowered his head to look at the bronze mirror constructed from the lock of desolate time under the table. This feeling is more like a student peeking at his mobile phone during class. "Is there anything troublesome, miss?" a female elder asked with a gentle tone of concern. Most of the tribesmen in the restricted area like this girl very much, because although she has the talent and arrogance of geniuses, she can still show humility and elegance when dealing with her elders. The most important thing is, she is good looking. And he is happy in everything he does. Hearing this, several elders also looked at Ya Lingxian. Ya Lingxian came back from her thoughts and smiled reluctantly. "It's okay, I was just thinking about the hunting activity in 7 days." After finally getting over it, Ya Lingxuan's thoughts returned to the conversation she had just had with the reincarnated queen. She somewhat regretted her previous provocation to the reincarnated queen. It would be okay if he failed to capture it, but what if that woman really succeeded in defeating Brother Mu? Just imagine, when Brother Mu sees her in the future, the first thing he says is, "Sister Lingxian, where is the reincarnated queen? I want to see her." If things develop to this extent, then who is the master of whom? Why make enemies for yourself for no reason? At this moment, the girl's heart was full of regret. However, no matter how hard she tried, there was no way she could ask the reincarnated queen to stop. It's hard to save face. She knew she was in a hurry, but she also knew she couldn't be in a hurry now. She had to be calm, she had to be calm. Although she was very worried at the moment, the girl still maintained a reserved and elegant smile on her face. With the saint's intelligence and strength, there is no need to worry about hunting. I believe that the saint will be able to impress all the elders this time. An elder comforted her, thinking that the saint was under too much pressure and that she was unconscious. Ya Lingxian smiled brightly, "Well, I will try my best." Speaking of which, it seems that a group of monks outside the restricted area today who planned to cause trouble in Dongzhou were taken into prison by the Imperial Army. One of them seems to be Musian. At this time, an old man suddenly asked, "Well, I also heard about this. It seems that the young lady took Mr. Mu directly out of the prison. Although there is nothing wrong with Yu Qing's doing so, it is a little unreasonable for Uli." This person was suspected to be an elder of the radical faction, so whenever he found an opportunity, he criticized Ya Lingxuan's actions tonight. Ya Lingxian glanced at the old man and said lightly, "Has elder son forgotten his relationship with King Di?" As soon as these words came out, the Presbyterian Church became quiet for a while. The name King Di must be taken seriously even in the entire restricted area. After all, she was the first to reach the level of ascension in Kyushu, and she had publicly protected Musian many times before. Coupled with the fact that Emperor Qing recently visited the restricted area, it is indeed inappropriate to lock Musian in the restricted area prison at this moment. But that time, the Green Emperor arranged the wedding in order to escape the heavenly tribulation. The two of them are not real Taoist couples, right? At this time, an elder raised a question. Someone next to him shook his head and said, "Although this is the case, judging from the final result, the Green Emperor does not mind marrying Musian, this is a fact." Ya Lingxian corrected, "After all, they are not really married, and they are not Taoist couples. At best, they are just deceiving laymen. The elders are all experienced people. Do you believe such nonsense?" But of course, it is true that the two have a close relationship, so releasing him from prison also took the Green Emperor into consideration. The girl added again. The elders looked at each other. Everyone present was an old fox, so they naturally knew why the young lady made such a statement. Although the young lady usually acts maturely and calmly, she is at a loss like a love novice when it comes to Musian. Otherwise, she would not have emphasized that the Green Emperor and Musian are not Taoist couples. The elders kept silent tacitly. "In that case, I'll have someone place young friend Mu in the guest palace for a few days. After all, it's not appropriate for him to live in the young lady's palace," the sixth elder said. Ya Lingxian frowned. She knew that the elder had no ill intentions, but was just a deep-rooted pedant. Some elders in the restricted area knew about the relationship between Ya Lingxian and Musian, but they didn't really agree. "He has helped me a lot in the past, so he must be treated well anyway," Ya Lingxian said. "That's why I said to invite him to other palaces and have him treated well," the sixth elder said with a smile. Ya Lingxian frowned slightly. She listened to the elder's suggestions more or less humbly in other aspects, but the girl rarely gave in when it came to Musian. Besides, this was something that the tribesmen would have to face sooner or later. She was about to speak. At this time, the sixth elder said with a smile, "In fact, I know how the young lady feels about young friend Mu, but you will be the queen of the restricted area in the future. How can a queen of a top force be the wife of a cultivator in the Return to Void realm? Old wife." The girl was thin-skinned. When she heard this, she blushed and lowered her head, but her beautiful eyes were shining. After a while, she coughed lightly and said reservedly, "Brother Mu and I, cough, do Muzian and I look so much like Taoist couples. Anyone with a discerning eye can see this. If the young lady wants to pretend, at least pretend to be a little more like one." An elder shook his head and sighed helplessly. "Is that so? I will pay attention to it later." Ye Lingxian nodded reservedly, trying her best to hold back the corners of her lips that wanted to curl up. "So they look so much like Taoist couples, I didn't notice it before." Several old men sighed secretly. "I really don't know what's so good about Muzian that makes my eldest lady so concerned about him. If you don't know him, you might think he is a great man in the Hedao realm. But now that Ye Lingxian cares so much about Muzian, they naturally can't persuade her anymore. Instead of starting with Ye Lingxian, it would be easier to let Muzian give up on his own." Several old men looked at each other, and it seemed that they had made up their minds to talk to Muzian alone later. At this time, a spy outside the door hurriedly pushed open the door and walked in. "Didn't you see that the meeting today is not over yet?" An elder frowned. The spy knelt on one knee, panting, as if he was still suppressing his inner excitement. It was not until a while later that he calmed down and said in a hurry, "Elder, the Empress of Yuzhou is asking for an audience outside the restricted area." Medicine Emperor. Several elders stood up one after another, and the fourth elder immediately reacted and said, "First, let someone go to welcome the Medicine Emperor." "No, you let someone wait, I will go there myself." The fourth elder is mainly responsible for establishing diplomatic relations with the outside world, but the restricted area has always been closed, so he doesn't have to do anything on weekdays. Even if it is necessary, it is done by the people below. But the Medicine Emperor is different, he is an alchemist close to the immortal level. This identity alone is enough for the people of the entire Zhou to take the initiative to make friends with him. "Ahem, old fourth, you have been practicing hard enough on weekdays, you don't need to do this little thing yourself, or I will go there for you." At this time, the old man with a white beard on the side coughed lightly, stood up, and wanted to leave. "Get lost. It is my duty to establish diplomatic relations with the outside world. Are you planning to go beyond your duty?" The fourth elder glared at the old man who spoke with a bad temper. Then, he glanced at several old men again, and saw that everyone had some envy and jealousy on their faces. Then he folded his hands contentedly and said with a smile, "Everyone, I will leave first. If I can take this opportunity to make friends with the Medicine Emperor, I may be able to ask her to help refine pills to extend my life in the future. For cultivators, there are unlimited possibilities only if they have a long life, and those low-quality pills that extend life will have less and less effect as time goes by. At their age, only those high-quality pills can extend their life. At this time, the advantages of those high-quality alchemists are perfectly reflected. The fourth elder naturally cannot give the job of having the opportunity to make friends with the Medicine Emperor to others. However, when the fourth elder just stood up, the spy hesitated and whispered, "Elder, the Medicine Queen said that there is no need to entertain her specially. She came to the restricted area to meet someone, and she will naturally go to meet her old friend after this." "Meet someone? Have you asked who it is?" the fourth elder frowned and asked. The spy looked at a few old monsters and hesitated. "Muzian." There was a deathly silence in the elders' meeting. The fourth elder's eyes were even more stunned. It was not until an unknown amount of time had passed that someone broke the silence blankly. "When did the Medicine King of Yuzhou get involved with Muzian?" Among the 9 states, Yuzhou has the most special status, because there are too many alchemists in Yuzhou, and the Empress of Yuzhou is infinitely close to the existence of an immortal alchemist. Not to mention the elders, even the great powers of the major forces in the 9 states are willing to make friends with this alchemy empress. However, the other party came to the restricted area specifically, just for Muzian? Ye Lingxian looked at the silent old men silently, without saying a word. Only she knew what was going on. I'm afraid Luo Tan has already refined the Juding Liangsu pill, so he personally sent it to Muzian. If they knew that the Empress of Yuzhou had just offered her natural furnace body to Muzian without reservation, I wonder what they would think. The corners of her mouth could not help but curl up a faint arc. For some reason, it should be a time for jealousy, but when Ye Lingxian thought of the expressions of the elders after they knew about that matter, she inexplicably felt a little bit of anticipation. I wonder how Brother Mu is doing. The girl inadvertently glanced at the bronze mirror under the table and the picture presented in the bronze mirror. As if she saw something, for a moment, Ye Lingxuan's smile froze and her eyes suddenly solidified. A quarter of an hour ago. After the spiritual energy circulated in his body for a big circle, the breath in Muzian's body became more stable. He opened his eyes from the state of meditation. Because he noticed that there was another person standing quietly beside him in the room. He looked in the direction of the breath, and saw that not far from the bed, Sanwu Yuja was standing quietly by the side, wearing a dark and simple waist-cinching long skirt, and a ribbon outlined her slender waist and full and upright chest. This figure is simply amazing, wow. It is obviously the previous life of Sister Lingxian. Why is her chest better developed than Sister Lingxian? Muzian subconsciously looked at it a few more times and couldn't help thinking secretly. The master has not fully developed. In the past 9 lives, her breasts were well developed in each life. When she reached adulthood, the cold and beautiful woman said in an emotionless tone. Muzian was startled. Can you read minds? I just roughly guessed your thoughts, the reincarnated queen said lightly. She looked like an emotionless robot, but I didn't expect her to have self-awareness. Why are you here? Muzian asked. Don't you need to stay by Sister Lingxuan's side? The master won't be in danger in the restricted area. She's worried about you, so she asked me to stay to protect your safety, the reincarnated queen explained. Most of the rules in the restricted area are invalid for the people in the restricted area. The higher the level, the more invalid rules there are. As Ye Lingxian is the reborn in this life, the restricted area rules are naturally completely invalid for her. On the contrary, it will be a little dangerous for Muzian here. Of course, these are just random excuses. The actual reason is a bet between a certain master and her. Muzian nodded thoughtfully. Is Sister Lingxian doing well in the restricted area? He asked. The reincarnated queen nodded gently, very well. At the beginning, there were indeed some people in the restricted area who would make things difficult for the saint of the restricted area. They hoped that their offspring would inherit the position of the master of the restricted area, but later they were all convinced by Ye Lingxuan's charm. In the restricted area now, there is nothing that bothers Ye Lingxian too much. But soon, she thought of Ye Lingxuan's previous instructions and added, but it's not particularly good. Good, but not particularly good. Muzian frowned and wondered, isn't Lingxuan's father the master of the restricted area? Is there anyone in the restricted area who will make things difficult for her? The reincarnated queen hesitated. The master of the restricted area will not help his daughter too much. After all, they are all his people. At least the position of the master of the restricted area needs her to fight for it herself. Muzian said to himself, so what she said about her encountering some troubles is true. At first, he was a little skeptical about the authenticity of Ye Lingxuan's troubles, but since even this cold and beautiful lady said so, she would definitely not lie. After all, this woman who has always been following Ye Lingxian like a shadow is disdainful of lying. The reincarnated queen nodded, she needs your help. Muzian nodded slightly, I will do my best to help her get to that position. Muzian has a dream. He hopes to live a leisurely and comfortable life every day even if he doesn't work hard, chatting with rich ladies and eating soft rice. Now this dream has been realized for the most part. Think about the future when all the fish in the fish pond grow into big sharks, he can almost live such a life. The only problem now is that the girls around him seem to have the risk of turning evil, so he has to improve his strength a little, so as not to be locked in a small dark room one day, and can only watch them discuss breaking up and splitting up without any resistance. For this, he now needs to solve one more thing. For example, helping the spirit dragon to ascend to the sky as soon as possible. I heard from Sister Lingxian that you have the memory of the past 8 lives, Musian suddenly asked, his eyes lingering on the beautiful face of the cold and beautiful royal sister for a moment, and then quickly glanced down from her full and upright chest to her long white legs, and then retracted his gaze. Are you asking me if I know the whereabouts of the flower of the avenue? The cold and beautiful royal sister asked in a calm tone. Musian was silent for a while. You really know how to read minds, right? This woman has guessed what he wants to do for the second time. I don't know how to read minds, but you are easy to guess. The reincarnated queen looked at Musian and continued. I know where the flower of the avenue is hidden. Musian suppressed his excitement and stared at the woman, waiting for her next words. However, the other party did not reply again. Where is the flower of the avenue? Musian finally couldn't help asking. The corners of the reincarnated queen's mouth curled up slightly. Curiosity has been aroused, and the next step is to put forward conditions. The woman recalled the content of the way to control your husband, and then she slightly brewed her emotions, and suddenly a bright smile like breaking the ice appeared on her cold and beautiful face. It's okay to tell you where the flower of the road is hidden. But I have a condition. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 533. In the bedroom, candlelight lit up the dim room, and a cracked window was opened to supply fresh air to the boudoir. The reincarnated queen had a bright smile on her exquisite and beautiful face. She stood elegantly, with a pair of long legs crossed, and the dress wrapped around the sexy body of a woman. She looked at Musian with a moving smile. At this moment, the woman did not look like an emotionless doll at all. If someone didn't know, he might think she was an innocent girl. But Musian was more and more hesitant in his heart, secretly looking at this stunning beauty. Conditions. What conditions? It was the first time he saw this doll being emotional like a human, and even making demands. But in the final analysis, the so-called dolls are not really dolls, but in most cases they have no emotions and will complete the tasks according to the initial settings, but in fact they are also people, with joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness. The reincarnation queen smiled and said, nothing, I just hope you can promise me something. Tell me first. Musian hesitated. If it was normal, he would have agreed, but he always felt that there was something wrong with the way this woman spoke. Tisk. The reincarnation queen turned her face away silently, secretly smacking her lips, as if she didn't expect Musian to be so tricky. This woman turned out to be a bit erratic. I never noticed it before, Musian thought. The reincarnation queen said, have you ever thought that the master intends to accept the memories of the reincarnation queen's previous 8 lives? How will she accept the memories? Also, how do I know where the flower of the great Dao is hidden? The reincarnation queen deliberately kept it a secret and continued, and why I wanted you to make a promise just now. Are you curious about these things? If you suddenly answer me that I won't tell you in the next sentence, I promise not to beat you to death. Musian nodded slightly. I am indeed a little curious. He also wanted to know what the reincarnation queen wanted to do and what promise she wanted. What do you want? Or, what do you need me to do? Musian asked. The reincarnation queen shook her head gently and said, I don't need you to do anything. Musian was startled, but before he could speak again, he heard the woman staring into his eyes and said in a serious tone, but I want you as a person. Musian. After being stunned for a long time, he doubted, did Sister Lingxian tell you something? With the character of the reincarnation queen, it is impossible for her to say such words on her own initiative. It is obvious that Ye Lingxian said something that made the other party say such shocking words as soon as she opened her mouth. The reincarnation queen's eyes flickered, and she said lightly, "She didn't say anything to me." However, the more the other party said this, the more suspicious Musian became, and said, "In that case, why did you suddenly say that you wanted me?" Even when Musian, who was LSP, said such words, he felt a little ashamed for some reason. The reincarnated queen put her fingertips on her lips, looked up, thought for a while, and said, "Maybe it's because I like you too. It's like when you are walking on the street one day, suddenly a beautiful woman sits on you and pats your shoulder from behind, and then says, 'Brother, let's try to date.' At this time, people's first reaction will not be joy, but they will wonder if this is a prank or a street show, or if she is here to get money." And the reincarnated queen at this moment gave Musian such a feeling. Although her appearance is beautiful and her expression changes are much richer than usual, Musian doesn't believe even a word she said. After all, she didn't say a few words to him in the past, how could she pursue him for no reason? "Senior, although I don't know what you want to do, I'm not that kind of casual person," Musian said reservedly. The reincarnation queen hummed softly, "I know that you are a person who pays more attention to the sense of ritual. You actually prefer the woman you pursue yourself to the woman you pursue yourself. However, there are exceptions to everything." The tall woman stepped on her sexy long legs and walked in front of Musian. She gently pressed one hand on Musian's shoulder. The eyes that used to be emotionless were now moist, and the corners of her mouth were hooked with a charming arc. The woman leaned down slightly and whispered in Musian's ear, "Agree to my conditions, and I will tell you the whereabouts of the flower of the avenue. You should really hope that the spirit dragon can fly to heaven, right?" The woman's cold voice revealed a different kind of charm, which also made Musian's heart ripple slightly. Then soon, he saw the strangeness in the eyes of the reincarnation queen. Her expression at this moment looked condescending, as if everything was under control. Musian quickly calmed down and asked, "Where did you learn this useless knowledge?" "This is not useless knowledge," the reincarnated queen said calmly, "at least for the women around you, this is much more important than any precious resources." She ignored Musian and said to herself, "Among the women you know, Byruoxi's figure is your favorite, and Kingdi is the woman who best suits your XP. You are often the most powerless against her, and you want to, her just by being slightly provoked. I have observed Kingdi's behavior when she was with you before, so I roughly know how she does it." The reincarnated queen had her long hair tied up with a jade hairpin, and a gorgeous purple dress set off her graceful and tight figure. Under the hem of the skirt, a pair of snow-white and delicate long legs were revealed. Under the candlelight, it seemed to have an ice crystal texture. She noticed Musian's scrutiny, and her expression remained calm. She said, "You like to actively pursue women, but you have never been able to resist women who actively tease you. But this seems to be the same for most men." Musian thought for a while and explained, "We usually call this kind of person LSP. Not only do I like it, but most men like it." The reincarnation queen tilted her head slightly, looked at Musian and said, "But most men will not actively pursue girls like you. Even if a small number of men do this, it is difficult for them to approach a proud girl like the master." There is a sentence she didn't say. In fact, it is not only difficult for other people to approach girls like Ye Lingxian, but also for most women. Whether Musian is willing or not, the fish in the fish pond will inadvertently drive away all the women who want to get close to him. But the reincarnation queen is an exception. She is Ye Lingxuan's previous life. She has always been like a shadow following Ye Lingxian, and she never speaks actively, so she is also the most easily ignored existence. Even Yao Meng ignored the existence of the reincarnation queen, and also didn't know that this woman had been watching silently beside Ye Lingxian when she was reading The Way to Control Your Husband. Compared to the title The Way to Control Your Husband, she felt that this book should be called The Way to Control Your Husband. What was written in it seemed to be a means of controlling men, but the whole book was completely about Musian's personality and hobbies. How much do you have to know about a person to write about his various preferences, when he would be shy, and when he would be moved in such detail? The reincarnation queen didn't know either. She stared at Musian and didn't say anything. After an unknown amount of time, Musian sighed and said, "I will stay in the restricted area until you are satisfied, is that okay?" After Musian finished speaking, he saw that the woman finally showed a satisfied smile. For some reason, he felt that her smile was sincere this time. As if she noticed Musian's gaze, the reincarnation queen looked at him in confusion. The two were very close, and Musian could even vaguely smell the fragrance emanating from her body, and the back of his hand vaguely touched her slightly cool back of the hand. After looking at each other for a moment, the woman suddenly turned her face away silently and didn't look at him. "Are you shy?" Musian asked. "It's not shy, but you are the master's man after all, and I can't be too close to you," the reincarnated queen said lightly. However, Musian felt that he had discovered her weakness and suddenly asked, "Do you know what it feels like to kiss?" The woman was slightly startled, and seemed a little curious, but a little embarrassed to ask him. She just stared at Musian with a pair of beautiful eyes. Musian finally smiled. "I thought this woman really knew everything, but it turned out to be a king in theory. This feeling is like those female doctors with full theoretical knowledge. Although they are well educated, they are completely inexperienced in practice." "Has Lingxian never been in love in the past 9 lives?" Musian asked in confusion. The reincarnated queen shook her head gently. "She has easily merged with the Dao several times in the past, so naturally she looks down on the opposite sex around her." She added, "In fact, even if you don't give her a seat in the heavenly court in the future, she can still ascend to heaven with her own ability." In the final analysis, she decided to reincarnate 9 times because she knew that she had a chance to fight for immortality in this life. Girls like Ya Lingxian can only be approached when her memory has not yet awakened and she is still a little fish. As the girl's mind grows, she may not look at you even if you are a great master of the Dao. Because from the beginning, Ya Lingxian's goal was not to merge with the Dao, but to ascend to heaven. "I don't rely on the seat in the heavenly court to ascend to heaven." Musian showed a thoughtful look and asked, "By the way, what did you experience in your last life?" He suddenly became a little curious. Why, Ya Lingxian in this life is a genius girl, but she was a three-no sister in the last life. I think something happened to make her like this. The reincarnation queen shook her head gently and said calmly, "It was just ordinary practice, and then it was successfully integrated." "Just like that? No thrilling experience or story happened?" Musian asked with doubt. "It stands to reason that before integrating with the Tao, more or less, one will encounter some extremely dangerous things. After all, the integration of the Tao depends on chance rather than effort." Musian originally thought that the reincarnation queen must have experienced something, so she closed her heart. "No," the reincarnation queen shook her head, "I used to meditate and practice alone, and cleaned up some of the rubbish that disturbed my practice. It seems that Lingxian's previous life may have been a simple meditation practice every day, and she didn't like to socialize with others, so she looked a little stupid and cute." Miss Linglong silently gave a thumbs up. "Where is the flower of the great Dao hidden?" Musian changed the question. However, the reincarnation queen did not answer directly, but asked first, "You just promised me that you will stay in the restricted area from now on." Why did she ask again? Musian was a little confused in his heart, and he was also a little alert. He considered his words and said, "I will stay in the restricted area until Sister Lingxian inherits the position of the queen of the restricted area, but why do you suddenly care so much about this matter?" Boom! As soon as the voice fell, thunder rolled in the sky. Although he didn't swear, the great Dao witnessed Musian's words and regarded it as a vow. At this time, under Musian's shocked expression of "You plotted against me," the reincarnation queen slowly took out a translucent white flower from her chest. Almost at that moment, the white flower exuded a vast aura that almost filled the entire room. In the astonished eyes of Musian, the reincarnated queen said calmly, "Do you know where the flower of the great Dao came from, and where the elixir came from?" In the past, people often said that there were only 9 elixir plants in the world, hidden in 9 forbidden places. People also said that the elixir was left by the immortal who ascended to the fairy land. The authenticity of these 2 things is still unknown, and I don't know, but the only thing that can be confirmed is that the flower of the great Dao was not left by the immortal, but a miracle born naturally from heaven and earth. No one knows how long it has existed in Jizhu, but it can indeed move the great Dao, and even if a cultivator gets it, he can use the great Dao to continuously evolve himself and become a flawless creature. The reincarnation queen handed the flower of the great Dao in her hand to Musian, and this flower is a layer of empty shell that the flower of the great Dao peeled off during its evolution. Rather than calling it the flower of the great Dao, it is more accurate to call it the flower of enlightenment. So, there has never been a flower of the great Dao in the forbidden area. Musian was a little disappointed when he heard the news, but soon after, he felt the breath of the great Dao in this flower. There is no doubt that this is also the flower of the great Dao, and it can also move the great Dao. However, it is not a real elixir, but an empty shell peeled off by an elixir. Who gave you this flower of enlightenment? Musian couldn't help asking. The ancient creature in the forbidden land of Dongzhou, the reincarnation queen said. Musian was surprised and said, "An ancient creature from the forbidden land? Why would it give you the enlightenment flower?" After spending a few days with the princess and Luotan, Musian has realized an important thing. The ancient creatures from the forbidden land once tried to completely cover Jizhu with the rules of the forbidden land. At that time, even most of Jizhu was a forbidden land. But later, there was a war in Jizhu, and someone took action to suppress the 9 taboos. It should be an enemy, but it took the initiative to give the enlightenment flower to the reincarnation queen. At that time, I encountered some troubles when I was in harmony with the Tao. In order to save me, it gave me the enlightenment flower. The reincarnation queen said, and according to it, it was actually just entrusted by someone. As for who that person is, I don't know too much, the reincarnation queen said. But in short, if Linglong wants to use the enlightenment flower to comprehend the Tao, the success rate is extremely high. After all, Linglong is born as a creature loved by the Tao. If the Tao realizes that it is a Linglong, I think it will not refuse. The reincarnation queen continued. Is it really okay for you to hand over such an important thing to me? Musian hesitated. Although he likes to get something for nothing, he and the Queen of Reincarnation are not particularly close after all, and he feels a little uneasy to take this quasi-immortal medicine. The Queen of Reincarnation said calmly, "No problem, after all, the enlightenment flower is of no use to me." Before Musian could say thank you, she changed the subject, "But if you want this enlightenment flower, you need to do me a favor." "Tell me what you want me to do first." Musian had already become more wary of this cold and beautiful lady. The other party looked like a pure little white rabbit, but he didn't expect that the Queen of Reincarnation's heart was dark when he was cut open. She actually tricked him just now and used the enlightenment flower to turn his words into a vow. Fortunately, he was smart, otherwise he might have a headache. "The lady and I bet that you will be intoxicated by my charm, so can you cooperate later?" the Queen of Reincarnation asked. How to cooperate? Musian was doubtful. The woman's face reappeared a charming smile, and she whispered, "Just listen to me when I speak. The master is still in the elders' meeting. I think he will not be able to help but peek at them through the desolate time lock in a while. When the master uses the desolate time lock, she will naturally be able to detect it. At that time, as long as the master sees her results tonight, she will win the bet." "What should I do?" Musian asked. "It's very simple dash." The reincarnation queen just said this, her eyes suddenly moved slightly, and she glanced in a certain direction inadvertently. Then, the corners of the woman's mouth inadvertently raised a faint arc, then looked at Musian and said, "Close your eyes." Musian hesitated at first, then found that the reincarnated queen looked at Wudeahua, as if to say, "Please cooperate, you don't want to lose Wudeahua, right?" He finally closed his eyes. "Raise your head." There was a hint of charm in the cold voice, followed by the breath and faint fragrance that he soon felt. Musian seemed to have known what she was going to do. He looked at her strangely, and after silently putting Wudeahua into the ring, he raised his head. The woman nodded with satisfaction, and then glanced in a certain direction inadvertently, and her eyes seemed to say, "Master, you see, I am right, right? Today I will show you what it means to pass Musian overnight. The author is so diligent to update so early, I want to vote for him." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 534. The lock of desolate time condensed into a bronze mirror and fell on Ye Lingxuan's hand, and the final scene was fixed on the scene where Musian raised his head slightly and closed his eyes. This gives people the feeling that the wife has to give in to the yellow hair for her husband's promotion. Click. Looking at the scene in front of her, Ye Lingxian couldn't help but tighten her hand on the bronze mirror. A crack appeared on the mirror surface, and then, dense cracks continued to sound in the silent Presbyterian church. The elders were still in shock. After all, no one thought that the purpose of Yuzhou's medicine emperor coming to the restricted area was to meet Musian. What sound? At this moment, an elder heard a small sound coming from the hall, and immediately raised his head and looked around, with doubts in his eyes. "The sound I just heard seemed to come from the lady," someone said. The elders looked at the girl suspiciously, but they saw that Ye Lingxian still maintained an elegant smile on her face. Maybe the elders heard wrongly. Seeing that several people seemed to have some doubts on their faces, Ye Lingxian continued, "If there is nothing else, today's meeting will end here. I still have things to deal with. If we go back a little later, Brother Mu may really turn into the shape of the reincarnated queen. What kind of thing is this? Her past life has corrupted her in this life." Ye Lingxian felt a little bad when she thought of this. However, just when Ye Lingxian stood up and was about to leave the Presbyterian church, she suddenly vaguely caught a breath outside the Presbyterian church. Ye Lingxuan's spiritual consciousness immediately swept over the person outside the hall, and she already knew it in her heart. Under normal circumstances, monks cannot casually scan the Hedeo power with their spiritual consciousness, because in most cases they will suffer backlash or even die suddenly. But Ye Lingxian is not in this category. Her body and spirit have been tempered for 9 generations, and she is far from ordinary. She stood up and walked out of the hall, and saw the woman who was leading the attendant to the outside of the hall. The gorgeous white dress showed off her sexy and tight figure. Her long hair was tied up with luxurious jade hairpins. A fiery red spiritual stone pendant was dotted in the middle of her plump and straight breasts. Her appearance was elegant and curved, and she looked at him with a smile. "Ye Lingxian, Medicine King." Almost all the elders reacted and raised their hands to bow. "I have met Senior Yao Huang." Luo Tan has long been accustomed to such scenes. Her eyes swept over several elders, then her eyes fell on Ye Lingxian, and she smiled. "Miss Ye, you should still remember me, right? I wanted to accept you as my disciple before and let you go with me to Yuzhou to receive the inheritance of alchemy." Several elders were slightly moved. Unexpectedly, the Emperor of Medicine once had the idea of accepting the young lady as his disciple. You know, the Empress of Yuzhou is very picky about talents. This is enough to prove that they did not make a mistake and supporting the young lady was the right choice. Ye Lingxian kept a reserved smile, How dare Lingxian forget the name of Senior Luo? It's just a pity that I can't get away because of the restricted area. Otherwise, I really want to ask you for advice on alchemy skills. By the way, I would like to ask if there is any elixir that can bind a man's heart. I'm sorry that Senior Luo visited the restricted area today. Can Lingxian take you to the guest room to have a rest for the night? Ya Lingxian continued. Luo Tan shook his head slightly and said, there are still things to deal with tomorrow in Yuzhou. I'm just here to deal with the matter, and I have to go back afterwards. She paused and continued, due to the rules in the restricted area, it is inconvenient for me to search with my spiritual sense here, so I can only trouble Miss Ye to tell Xiaomu where he is now. Miss Ye shouldn't mind, right? When she finished speaking, there was a smile on the woman's face. Obviously, Luo Tan only knew that Emperor Qing sent Muzian to Yuzhou and personally pushed him into her arms in order to help Muzian realize enlightenment as soon as possible. But Luo Tan didn't know. In fact, Ye Lingxian also knew about this. At this moment, the Medicine King is still immersed in the pleasure and excitement brought by N.T.R. However, even the Yuzhou Empress did not expect that not only Qing Emperor, but also Ye Lingxian also knew what Muzian did when he went to Yuzhou. Looking at the most beautiful Empress in front of her, Ye Lingxian, after a brief thought, quickly showed a sweet and pure smile. That's natural, I will send someone to take you to see Brother Mu now. Originally, she was still worried about what she would do if she really killed Brother Mu in her previous life. But the moment she saw Luo Tan, a perfect plan quietly emerged in the girl's heart. Other side. It seems that the young lady has unlocked the original surveillance of the Lock of Time. After realizing that the Lock of Desolate Time had been put away by Ye Lingxian, the reincarnated queen took half a step back, turned around gracefully, walked to a table nearby and sat down. Muzian looked at her slender figure and asked doubtfully, speaking of which, why did you make such a bet with her? Winning or losing doesn't have any impact on you, right? The reincarnated queen nodded slightly, she is my master. In fact, it is neither emotional nor reasonable to win her. Then why do you still want to win? The reincarnated queen shook her head, I'm not sure, maybe it's because I want to see what kind of expression the proud master will show after losing to me in a bet, right? Muzian was stunned and said nothing. I didn't expect that you, a thick-browed, big-eyed person who usually doesn't talk, would have so many evil intentions hidden in your heart. The woman turned her head and glanced at Muzian, as if she knew what he was thinking. She raised the corner of her mouth with a faint arc and said, since you have something to do, I won't disturb you for now. I hope you won't bother me after this. What happened tonight is leaked. Muzian thought for a while and said, it's okay for me to wait. I don't mind if you want to stay and sit for a while. He also wanted to know more about what Sister Lingxuan's previous life was like. However, the reincarnated queen ignored him and stood up to leave. Why do I feel like I've been cheated on for free? Muzian muttered silently. He had been flirted with by this woman so many times tonight that he was in a state of despair, and yet she just left like this. At this time, the reincarnated queen suddenly stopped. She hesitated and asked, what does the kiss you just mentioned feel like? Muzian was startled, then he couldn't help laughing and said, you have read a lot of books, isn't it written in the books? That's different. In the end, theories are just theories. People who have actually experienced kissing say that they are more accurate, the woman said. Muzian thought for a while and said with a smile, kissing doesn't feel like anything, but if the person you like is the person, even a little intimate contact will make people happy. Do you love me? The reincarnated queen looked thoughtful. If she also has someone she likes, would she be overjoyed to have a little intimate contact with her lover, like Muzian said? Generally speaking, the intimate things you do are determined based on the degree of intimacy. The higher the intimacy, the more things you do, Muzian explained. The reincarnated queen nodded slightly, I understand this. At first, You and the master just kissed, but then you played more and more games, but I still can't understand why you like the lady's feet, and you even let her do it before. Don't take off your white socks. Although it was said in the way of controlling a husband that men have countless XP, she still couldn't understand why Musian liked feet. Musian almost froze, coughed twice and said, "This matter involves some unknown secrets. I will talk to you slowly when I have time in the future." He quickly changed the subject and said, "Compared to this, if you want to know what kissing feels like, wouldn't it be nice to actually experience it yourself?" The reincarnated queen was stunned for a moment, seemed to react, glanced at him, then turned around and quickly disappeared into the boudoir. Although she usually behaves very coldly, she unexpectedly has a girlish mentality. Musian couldn't help but smile while looking at this scene. He took out the translucent flower of enlightenment from the ring. The flower core reveals a rich glow, filling the whole room with aura. Because he had been in and out of the avenue before, Musian could clearly feel that this aura was the avenue at this moment. Through it, Linger may be able to smoothly influence the avenue, and then maybe he can ascend to heaven. While thinking about this, Musian suddenly vaguely caught a familiar scent outside the boudoir. He stood up and left the boudoir, following the direction of the breath and walking out of the bedroom. Luo Tan was sitting on the high wall outside the dormitory, wearing an extremely gorgeous white dress that looked dazzling even in the dark night. Musian looked up and saw the woman's beautiful pale golden eyes that seemed to be smiling but not smiling. "Coming to see you late at night, I shouldn't have disturbed your good things, right?" Musian was surprised and said, "Your Majesty, why are you in the restricted area?" Although this is just Luo Tan's clone, it has inherited at least 1/3 of her strength. If she is injured due to triggering certain rules in the restricted area, Luo Tan's main body will also be injured. Luo Tan swayed her graceful legs under her white skirt. Her tall figure had attractive curves. She rolled her eyes at Musian and said, "Who do you think I came to the restricted area for?" "For you." She took out a small, exquisitely crafted jade box from her arms and threw it out of the air. Musian raised his hand to catch it. He didn't even need to open it, but he already realized what was stored in the jade box. "Have you refined the 9 cauldron refining void pill?" Musian asked. "Open it and take a look." "Are you satisfied?" Luo Tan said with a smile. The moment Musian opened the jade box, the rich fragrance of the medicine filled the entire courtyard. It seemed as if there was a faint glow illuminating the dark night, and misty clouds and smoke overflowed from the elixir, giving it a rich and refreshing fragrance. Juding refining Sudan. She didn't expect that she could refine it so quickly. According to Musian's expectation, it would take at least 3 days. She probably didn't do much else in the past 2 days to refine this elixir. Thinking of this, Musian's eyes became more sincere and grateful, and he said, "Thank you. I worked so hard to come all the way from Yuzhou to the restricted area, and even put aside tomorrow's morning memorial, just to hear you say thank you." Luo Tan rolled his eyes and said angrily. She fell lightly from the high wall, holding her hands behind her back and stepping on her white boots. She walked step by step in front of the young man, raised her teasing eyes and said, "I used to tell my subjects that thanking you is not verbal, but through practical actions." Musian shrugged, "Your Majesty has everything I have, including pills and spiritual stones. You are not short of anything. What else can I do besides thank you?" "I don't have everything, at least there is something precious that only you have," Luo Tan said with a smile. "What?" Musian asked hesitantly. "You." Luo Tan chuckled softly. She grabbed Musian's collar and pulled it gently. At the same time, she took half a step forward. When her red lips opened slightly, her sweet breath spat on Musian's face. There is also a sultry voice, "I have everything but you." Musian fell into silence. He never thought that one day he would be flirted with. At this time, Luo Tan stared into the young man's eyes. Her beautiful face was getting closer to Musian little by little, and her seductive red lips seemed to be almost close to his lips. Musian reacted immediately, gently pressed Logotan's shoulder, and whispered, "This is Lingxuan's boudoir, or should we wait until we return to Yizhou?" Before he finished speaking, Logotan gently kissed the young man's lips, slowly opened his moist beautiful eyes, and said softly through sound transmission, "She is the one who sent someone to bring me to see you tonight." Lingxuan's original intention was to drive away wolves and swallow tigers, while she was the one guiding everything from behind and enjoying the final results. However, I am afraid that even Lingxian did not expect that the reincarnated queen was just showing off her acting skills tonight, and left right after she finished her acting skills. There was no dispute between the Medicine King and the reincarnated queen as she had expected. And now Musian is the only one left in the dormitory. "Lingxian brought you here." Even Musian couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He knew that Logotan would not lie like this. In other words, it was really Lingxian who brought Logotan to see him. Sister Lingxian must have some strange hobbies, otherwise why would she send someone to lure Logotan to her boudoir so late at night? Logotan gently let go of Musian's delicate hand and smiled, "Perhaps it's because the princess of the Forbidden Zone knows that I have the 9 cauldron refining void pill in my hand, and she also hopes that you can realize it as soon as possible, so she sent someone to bring me to see you." Bar. When she said this, she seemed to have guessed what Musian would say next, so she raised an index finger in front of her red lips and said, "SHH, SHH, if your sister Lingxian discovers you here, you should know what the consequences will be if we are intimate, right?" Musian was silent for a while. "Why does this line sound so N.T.R? Your Majesty, what do you want?" Musian asked. Logotan smiled, gently placed her plump and graceful body in his arms, and breathed Rolan into the young man's ear, "I just miss you, can't I?" The moist eyes, the beautiful face so close at hand, and the seductive aura brought by the opening and closing of the red lips. Musian stared at the woman's beautiful face, feeling the tenderness of the woman's delicate body and the unique fragrance of her body. His hands hung in the air for a while, and finally he pressed them on her plump and soft waist, and then hugged her tightly. The Empress of Yizhou narrowed her eyes and showed a pleasant smile on her face. She gently touched the boy's face, and then, a quiet and sweet voice came from the courtyard outside the boudoir. "It's okay to stay here, right?" So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 535. That night, Logotan was leaning against the soft bed, combing the boy's hair leisurely. "After returning to the peak of the void, both your furnace and energy are much stronger than before." Logotan's tone was a little lazy, and he looked at the boy with a playful look, and continued, "By the way, the first time you perform the spiritual energy exchange ceremony with the natural furnace, you will get a lot of spiritual energy, and there will be an effect after that, but it will not be as exaggerated as the beginning. In other words, you and I can also complement each other from now on." Musian came back to his senses and smiled, "It always feels too unreal. How could the heavenly Dao allow 2 natural furnaces to bug each other like this?" Logotan smiled and said, "In the past, no one in Zhuzhou ever thought that I would practice dual cultivation with anyone. Even the heavenly Dao could not predict the future, or even guess who I would choose in the end." Musian was silent. That's right, let alone the heavenly Dao. In fact, he didn't expect Logotan to take the initiative to make this proposal at the beginning. It's not that Musian has never thought about the operation of credit mutual spiritual energy, but even if there are other natural furnace bodies in Zhuzhou, it is impossible to have such an effect as Logotan. After all, she is the only natural furnace in the Hedao realm. If she is replaced by a lower-level natural furnace, it is impossible to have such a good effect. And if Logotan is not willing, no one can force her to do anything. Huh? Do you have other lovers in the restricted area? At this time, Luo Tan suddenly noticed something and looked outside the hall in confusion. Musian was also stunned. I have so many lovers, which one are you talking about? Mr. Mu, are you okay? At this time, a voice came from outside the boudoir, and Musian realized the identity of the visitor. Lin Qiu, she is the daughter of the master of Swanyan Hall. This time, it seems that she came to the restricted area alone to complete the assessment task of Swanyan Hall, Musian explained in a voice transmission. Then, he looked up and said, Miss Lin, why are you here so late? Luo Tan looked at the boy with interest, and noticed that he seemed to be about to get out of bed, but suddenly one hand held his arm and prevented him from letting go. Are all your XPS in the Hedeo realm so weird, or why not call it New Deo realm in the future? Musian naturally knew what Luo Tan was thinking at the moment, nothing more than stimulating thoughts such as immorality. He was a little speechless in his heart, and gently pinched Luo Tan's soft waist. The Empress of Yuzhou subconsciously covered her mouth and almost made a sound, and immediately glared at the boy. I wanted to tease the other party, but I didn't expect to be teased instead. Even if it was her, she didn't want too many people to notice the relationship between her and Musian so quickly. First, this lacks the pleasure of an underground relationship, and second, after all, she is the Empress of Yuzhou. If it is rumored that she secretly got together with the Taoist partner of the Qing Emperor, it will always be embarrassing. Not long ago, the princess of the restricted area sent someone to tell you that you are fine, but I am still worried, so I came to see you. But it seems that Mr. Mu is fine now. Lin Qiu's voice was soft and weak, and she whispered. Thank you, Miss Lin, for your concern. I am fine now. Did the Imperial Guards make things difficult for you at that time? They knew my identity, so they put me in the guest room. I was thinking about finding a way to rescue Mr. Mu, but it seems that the princess and Mr. Mu have a good relationship, Lin Qiu said. But this time there was a hint of loss in her tone, which made people feel a little distressed. Musian's heart softened when he heard this, and he was about to speak. At this moment, Luo Tan suddenly made a surprised sound of "huh," and whispered, Xianyan body. Your Majesty, have you also heard of Xianyan body? Musian asked in a voice transmission. Luo Tan hummed softly and said, alchemy emphasizes the yin and yang and the 5 elements, with fire being the main yang. Usually, those high-level natural treasures are difficult to smelt, so they need to be smelted with spiritual fire, but there is also a problem, that is, the temperature of the spiritual fire is difficult to control, and sometimes the medicinal materials are often burned out while being refined. So usually the temperature of the spiritual fire needs to be controlled artificially. A good cauldron is the key to alchemy, but controlling the temperature is also the top priority. The Swanyan body is born with the most yin constitution in the world, and the owner of this constitution can often control the temperature of the spiritual fire independently. This is a very suitable seedling for alchemy. Luo Tan's tone was a bit of sigh. Musian heard the hidden meaning in Luo Tan's words, thought for a moment, and said, why don't you consider taking her as your apprentice? The alchemy queen rolled her eyes at the young man, and said charmingly, do you really think that Yuzhou is a shelter? You want to push everyone to me. Last time she was a guest official of your family, and this time you want to push your little lover to me. She paused and continued, but if she is willing, I am willing to make an exception and take her as my apprentice and let her stay in the Yuzhou palace for a while. Does this mean that your Majesty has also developed a heart of cherishing talent? Musian couldn't help but laugh. Luo Tan's fingertips lazily stroked the boy's face, his eyes full of affection. Of course I have a heart of cherishing talent, but more importantly, it's because you are the one who asked. She lifted the sheets, and the vast white light wrapped around her delicate body. The next moment, the luxurious and elegant white dress quietly wrapped around her sexy figure, and her long hair like a waterfall fell straight down, revealing a bit of lazy mess. As expected of a rich lady, she even made this dress from some special top-grade silk. No wonder she always felt a faint fragrance, maybe it was because of this dress. Muzian sighed in his heart, "Sister, I don't want to work hard anymore. Mr. Mew, if you have anything to do, then I will go back first." At this time, the girl's tone of loss came from outside the door, and then there was the sound of the footsteps of the reincarnation. Muzian glanced at Luotan, and under the woman's teasing eyes, he shouted to the door, "Wait a minute, I have something to tell you." After a while, Muzian left the boudoir, and soon caught up with the sick girl who was about to leave. "Mr. Mew, is there anything else?" The girl turned her head and looked at him. Her voice was soft and fragile, without any arrogance that a young lady should have. Her long and smooth hair was naturally scattered, and she was staring at him with a pair of beautiful eyes as clear as the sky. The girl's appearance would remind people of an exquisitely crafted doll, petite and fragile. If she were in modern times, she should be a high school student, but her petite body gave people the feeling of being weak just in junior high school. This is the inconvenience that the Swanyan body brings to the girl named Lin Qiu. Although she has the strongest physique in the world, even if she embarks on the road of cultivating immortals, she will still have a fever and cold like ordinary people, and this feeling of weakness accompanies her all the time. Muzian showed a gentle smile, "I'll take you back. You are weak and it's not convenient to go back alone." The moonlight reflected on the girl's slightly pale and beautiful face, and the silver light added a bit of weakness to her. Lin Qiu looked at Muzian in surprise, then lowered her head and said "Hm." The two of them strolled under the peach tree, the moonlight was hazy, and they were almost at the guest bedroom. At this time, Muzian suddenly said, "Miss Lin's physique has been like this since she was a child, so has your father ever said that there is any way to restore your physique?" Lin Qiu shook her head gently, "Dad once said that the reincarnation water can make a person's physique complete an advancement, and maybe it can make the Swanyan body complete the evolution, but there are also certain risks. Because the evolved Swanyan body will evolve in a better direction, or will it become worse and worse, this is uncertain. After all, the Swanyan body is different from other physiques, and its negative effects are too obvious. If it evolves again, will it become weaker, or will it evolve in a better direction? No one can tell now. Yao Meng and the Empress of Yizhou are old acquaintances. Miss Lin, are you interested in going to Yizhou later? With the knowledge of Senior Ye Huang, he may be able to help you solve the problem of Swanyan body, Muzian suddenly said. Lin Qiu looked at him silently and shook his head gently, "Forget it, if I go to ask King Di for help because of my affairs, I always feel a little embarrassed." Muzian smiled and said, "It's not a big deal. Just tell Yao Meng." Lin Qiu couldn't help but chuckled when she heard it. "How long does Mr. Mew plan to keep it secret from me? In fact, I know that Mr. Mew and King Di's wedding in Shenhuang City was just to cover up the truth," she continued. "When the Green Emperor ascended to heaven, she was bound to be watched by countless people. Only by using that grand wedding to confuse the eyes could she have a chance to ascend smoothly. So Master Mew sacrificed his innocence only for the sake of Senior Green Emperor's heavenly tribulation? My father also guessed so." She seemed to have guessed right, but not completely right. Muzian was silent for a while and said, "Senior Medicine Emperor is familiar with countless kinds of elixirs. Maybe he can refine elixirs that suppress your Swanyan chi in the future. She has always admired you and thinks you are a rare talent." "If I go to Yizhou, can I still see Master Mew?" Lin Qiu asked. It is tempting to be able to ask the Medicine Emperor for advice on alchemy skills, but whether she can still see Muzian in Yizhou is the issue she cares most about. Muzian nodded and said, "In fact, I have been asking Senior Yehuang for advice on alchemy skills during this period, and I will naturally go to Yizhou later." The girl smiled slightly and said softly, "Okay, let's go. But will Senior Yehuang really agree? Will she be very strict?" She lowered her head slightly with some worry in her tone. "Mr. Mew, I'm scared." Muzian couldn't help but reach out and rub the girl's head, and said softly, Senior Yehuang is a person who cherishes talent, so she won't treat you harshly. Lin Qiu couldn't help but close her eyes slightly. Just as she thought before, the boy's palm was very warm, and there was a kind of magic that made people feel inexplicably at ease. She raised her eyes to peek at Musian's expression, then took a small step closer and gently leaned her forehead on Musian's arms. Musian was stunned for a moment, then naturally hugged the girl in his arms, lowered his head and stared at the sickly white face. Slightly pale lips, soft body, and soft and slightly cool little hands. Among the girls Musian had known in the past, Lin Qiu's body was probably the weakest and most petite. Musian stretched out his hand to hold the thin waist of the sickly and beautiful girl, and the girl let him hold her and leaned her forehead against his arms. It seemed that under his comfort, the girl's originally uneasy heart gradually calmed down. But when she inadvertently raised her eyes to look at the handsome face of the boy, a faint arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. At this moment, Ye Lingxian was on her way back to her boudoir. She had even thought about how to stop the dispute between the Reincarnation Queen and Luo Tan in the future, fully demonstrating the calmness and composure of the master of the first palace. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt a figure appear beside her. Reincarnation Queen. Ye Lingxian turned her head and said in surprise, why are you here? When she said this, the girl soon realized it again and said, oh, I know, have you given up the idea of attacking Brother Mu? I told you a long time ago that Brother Mu is not someone who can be easily conquered. However, as soon as the voice fell, the Queen of Reincarnation looked at her young lady in confusion and said, Musian has agreed to that condition, so there is no need for me to stay there. Ye Lingxian was stunned. You mean? The Queen of Reincarnation continued, he has promised to stay with the young lady and assist you until you successfully ascend to the position of Queen of the Forbidden Zone, so I left. Brother Mu agreed to stay, Ye Lingxian said with a hint of surprise and joy. But soon, Ye Lingxian realized that something was wrong. Wait a minute, when you came out just now, didn't you meet the Medicine Emperor? The Queen of Reincarnation asked in confusion, Medicine Emperor? She also came to see Musian. As soon as she finished speaking, she found that Ye Lingxian's face had changed. Then, she went to her boudoir without saying anything. According to the girl's original plan, she should have let the Medicine Emperor disturb the Reincarnation Queen's good thing, so that the master and servant's bet would be her victory. However, the Reincarnation Queen did not see the Medicine Emperor when she left. The plan was completely disrupted. The girl had just returned to her bedroom and happened to see Musian escorting Lin Qiu out of the bedroom. He noticed the girl's sight, looked up and smiled, Sister Lingxian, are you done with everything? Yeah. Ye Lingxian nodded with mixed feelings, and then asked tentatively, Brother Mu should be okay? Senior Medicine Emperor said that he had something important to ask you, so I asked someone to bring her here. It's okay, she just brought me the Liangsu pill. Musian shook his head and smiled, but his heart was a little complicated. I didn't expect Sister Lingxian to have that kind of hobby. While thinking, he looked at the classical and elegant purple-dressed girl with strange eyes. At this moment, Musian still thought that this innocent girl was a girl who liked to be cheated on. Did she leave? Ye Lingxian asked, who had no idea. She said she was going to say hello to your mother at the Tianxian Palace and was going to go back. After all, she had other things to deal with in Yuzhou tomorrow. Musian said. Senior Yehuang is so busy. Ye Lingxian was relieved when she heard it. Since she is so busy, she shouldn't have the leisure to do anything with Brother Mu, right? And this is her bedroom. After relaxing, Ye Lingxian's attention quickly fell on the pill in Musian's hand and asked, when does Brother Mu plan to break through to the Enlightenment realm? If it's in the restricted area, it can save a lot of trouble. After all, there are rules and restrictions in the restricted area. Even if the secret of the Tiansheng furnace is exposed later, the powerful people in Zhuzhou will only wait until Musian leaves the restricted area before taking action. Muzian thought for a moment and said, the duration of the Judingliangsu is only 7 days. After 7 days, the medicinal effect will quickly fade. I can't wait for Senior Linglong to ascend to heaven. I will start tomorrow after a reorganization. Ya Lingxian hummed lightly and was about to continue speaking. But at this moment, she suddenly felt the pink smoke coming from afar. The smoke was as ethereal as clouds and smoke, but it was filled with the strongest and most violent breath. Huh? She actually did it? A woman's lazy and charming voice suddenly came from the bottom of Muzian's heart, but there was a little more envy in the voice that was not usually there. Nine-tailed sky fox. My queen, do you know where the movement just now came from? Muzian asked in his heart. Are you stupid? Who else in the world can have such a strong demonic aura except her? The nine-tailed sky fox lazily scolded. Muzian had long been accustomed to her way of speaking, and hesitantly asked, you mean, the queen of the demon realm? Has she come out of retreat? If she just came out of retreat, there wouldn't be such a big commotion, the nine-tailed sky fox said lightly. Muzian said to himself, so, has she ascended to heaven? In the 9 provinces, the more talented the cultivator is, the more difficult it is to practice, and in the demon world, almost every demon cultivator is stronger than a human cultivator in terms of physical body alone. However, this is not completely without cost. For example, the difficulty of thunder tribulation for demon cultivators is far greater than that of human cultivators. Because of this, the population of the demon world has not increased. Muzian naturally believed that it was only a matter of time for the demon queen to ascend to the sky, but he didn't expect that she had successfully passed the tribulation so quickly. On the other side, Ya Lingxian also realized something. She looked through the forbidden area and looked thoughtfully at a certain direction in the demon world. After a long time, she gently uttered 3 words, the realm of transformation. It seems that the demon queen has really come out of the closed door. On this day, even Dongzhou, which is separated by an ocean, seemed to be able to hear the cheers of the demons in the demon world of Bizhu, like a group of demons dancing wildly. The ascension of the Qing Emperor was undoubtedly a huge blow to the demon world, which had always regarded Dongzhou as its mortal enemy. Although they believed in the strength of the queen, they could not help but feel a shadow in their hearts. But now, the queen has also ascended to the sky, and she has also devoured the power of the first generation of demon kings. Her strength is unfathomable. Such cheers were almost everywhere in the demon world, even the palace of the demon world was filled with joy at this moment. At this moment, the demon queen was leaning against the throne made of purple gold fairy iron, wearing a loose robe, and looking down at the people below the stage with narrow and long Danfan beautiful eyes. The 13 seats of the demon world were standing respectfully below the stage, and not far from the 13 seats, there was also a hunched back, looking ordinary old man. The second person in the demon world, Longxu Ancient Emperor. Congratulations to your majesty for successfully ascending to the immortal realm. From now on, our demon world also has a human emperor in the immortal realm sitting in charge, and no longer needs to fear the power of Dongzhou. Maybe after this, we can settle the old and new grudges of the past together. A demon cultivator below the stage raised his hand and bowed, saying respectfully. The queen of the demon realm glanced with her beautiful eyes and said calmly, the hatred between the demon realm and Dongzhou was caused by the first generation of the demon king. Among the 9 states, Yuzhou and Yunzhou have formed an alliance for mutual benefit. The southern wilderness has always been on good terms with the western regions, but the demon realm and Dongzhou have always been fighting each other and suffered countless losses. Do you really think that I alone can overthrow the entire Dongzhou? Not to mention that woman Shang Yanfei, the Green Emperor and the Sword Emperor alone are already difficult enough. Do you want the entire demon world to be buried with you because of this stupid opinion? The woman's appearance is charming, and her voice is even more casual. However, with every word she said, the demon cultivator's heart became more fearful, until finally, he knelt on the ground with a plop. Your Majesty, spare me, Your Majesty, spare me. The Queen of the Demon Realm said lightly, I don't want to hear similar remarks again. The demon cultivator's back was already covered with cold sweat, and he lowered his head quickly. Yes. But you are right about one thing. The past hatred has planted the seeds of hatred in the hearts of Dongzhou and the demon world, so it is far from enough to rely on time to resolve it. The Queen of the Demon Realm looked around at everyone and said, do you have any way to understand each other with Dongzhou? The demon cultivators heard this and knew that this was an opportunity to show off in front of the Queen of the Demon Realm, and they expressed their opinions one by one. I think we can let it go, time is enough to heal all the scars. Can this be considered an opinion? The fourth seat next to him shook his head and said, some scars will indeed be healed over time, but there is a feud between Dongzhou and the demon world, and this cannot be healed just by healing it. The high-level officials of the demon world and Dongzhou are now tacitly aware of each other, and there are rarely any major conflicts, but the cultivators under Dongzhou and the demon world are still hostile to each other, which is not a scar that can be healed over time. Just like just now in the main hall, there are still demon cultivators who speak up and covet Dongzhou. However, the demon queen did not really want to ask for opinions. Dongzhou and the demon world are indeed feuds, but after the trade between the two sides is officially opened, the two sides will naturally be able to slowly resolve their past grievances after they have exchanges with each other. The ruler of the demon world glanced at the first seat Shi Miaoan, who had never spoken. Shi Miaoan understood, raised her hands and bowed in tacit understanding, and said respectfully, Your Majesty, before the Dongzhou dynasty was unified, there were often marriages between two countries, that is, the princess of the dynasty was married to a foreign country, or the princess of a foreign country married the prince of the dynasty, which made a lot of good stories. I think maybe we can consider it from this aspect. When these words came out, the eyes of several demon cultivators present all lit up. Marriage is indeed a good method, but should the demon world marry over or the cultivators from Dongzhou marry over? In addition, the candidate for marriage also needs to be considered. Listening to the discussions of the crowd, the Queen of the Demon World looked thoughtful, and then asked casually, Miaoan, who do you think is more suitable for this marriage candidate in Dongzhou? Shi Miaoan said respectfully, Muzian. The discussion in the court suddenly became completely silent. Today's 6,000 completed, please vote. The marriage is fun from the beginning.